Hey there, tonight we're diving into the flour-dusted world of ancient Roman baking, where the truth is, most bread had more in common with construction material than a modern baguette. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now settle in, maybe turn on some white noise or grab your favorite blanket, and let's drift into tonight's story together. The sun creaks over the horizon, spilling its golden light onto the cobblestone streets of ancient Rome, and you, my friend, are about to embark on a day that smells like freshly baked bread and a hint of historical intrigue. As the city stirs to life, the aroma of baking wafts through the alleys, drawing you towards the heart of Rome's culinary scene, the bustling bakery. Yes, the Roman bakeries are your destination today, where flour-dusted pistors, fancy word for bakers, need not just dough but the very economy of this sprawling empire. Now let's set the scene. Rome, the city of 7 hills, is not just the epicenter of politics and gladiatorial spectacles, but also the breadbasket of an empire. Bread here is not merely food. It's a statement, a currency, a symbol of Roman ingenuity. You see, bread was an integral part of the Roman diet, and the most common type you'll encounter is the panis quadratus. This peculiar bread is round, but divided into quarters, resembling a pizza before pizza was cool. The Romans baked it with such precision, you'd think they were engineering aqueducts. The pistors, these bakers of bread and dreams, hold a significant status in Roman society. They're not just kneading for the sake of a meal, they're pivotal to the economic engine. In fact, bread was so essential that the government took a keen interest in its production and distribution. Forget your notions of romanticized free bread for the masses. Sure, Rome had its annona system, a state-sponsored grain dole, but it was less about generosity and more about keeping the peace and avoiding riots. Bread and circuses, remember. Speaking of grain, let's talk logistics. The grain fueling this bread bonanza mostly hails from Egypt and Sicily, the breadbaskets of Rome. It's shipped across the Mediterranean, a journey that's not exactly a Sunday picnic. Picture grain ships navigating treacherous waters, all to ensure that Rome doesn't run out of its daily bread. The grain supply chain was a marvel of ancient logistics, and it had to be. If the grain stopped, so did Rome. People get cranky when they're hungry, and cranky Romans meant trouble. Now about that so-called free bread policy. It's easy to get swept up in the idea of Rome as a utopia of endless handouts, but the reality was as gritty as the flour dusting your sandals. The annona was a form of government control, a way to keep the populace satisfied and subdued. The system distributed grain to citizens, but it was a tightly controlled process. Don't be fooled by visions of Romans lounging around gobbling free loaves. The distribution was limited to the city's citizens and was more about maintaining social order than altruism. The economy, you ask? Well, bread was big business. Romans didn't just consume it, they traded it, taxed it, and even used it as a political tool. Bread prices could sway public opinion and even elections. It was a commodity as much as it was a necessity. In fact, the price of bread was a topic of daily conversation, akin to how we chat about gas prices today. It was not uncommon for emperors to intervene directly to ensure that the bread supply was steady and affordable, lest they face the wrath of a hungry mob. As you wander through the Roman streets, absorbing this slice of history, consider the pistors. These bakers were more than just craftsmen. They were vital cogs in the societal machine, operating under a system that was equal parts benevolent and controlling. The bread they produced was a testament to the complexities of Roman society, a society that celebrated its achievements while wrestling with the intricacies of empire. So, as the aroma of freshly baked panis quadratus fills the air, take a moment to appreciate the layers of history baked into each loaf. This isn't just bread, it's a story of power, politics, and the practicalities of feeding a city that was the beating heart of an empire. And as you continue your day in ancient Rome, remember that the simplest of staples often carries the weight of the world. Now, as your sandals shuffle through the ancient Roman streets, let's turn our attention to the real stars of this bread spectacle, the pistors. These bakers of Rome weren't just slinging dough. They were orchestrating a daily symphony of sweat and flour. Imagine this. The day begins with milling the grain, something that sounds quaint until you're the one cranking a stone quern for hours. These hefty stone tools were the Roman equivalent of a gym membership, providing both biceps and breakfast. The grinding process was a laborious affair, taking hours to produce just enough flour for a few loaves. And here's a fun fact for your next dinner party. It typically took about 2,000 rotations of a quern to grind enough flour for a single family's daily bread. Talk about earning your carbs. The querns, made from volcanic stone, were as durable as Roman roads, and just as essential. They were the unsung heroes of the kitchen, tirelessly pulverizing grain into flour fine enough for a Roman feast. Once the flour was ready, it was mixed with water and salt, sometimes with a touch of sourdough starter if the baker was feeling fancy. But don't get too romantic about these rustic loaves. The reality of bread making was gritty, literally. Bits of stone from the querns often found their way into the dough, adding an unexpected crunch to your morning pannies. It was like a surprise tooth-chipping hazard, a little Roman roulette with every bite. After the dough was kneaded into submission, it was time to fire up the communal ovens. Ah, the communal oven, where neighbors gathered not to exchange pleasantries, but to compete for prime baking time. These large dome-shaped ovens were the heart of the neighborhood, built with bricks and insulated with layers of clay to retain heat. The ovens were heated by burning wood, and once hot enough, usually around 450 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 232 degrees Celsius, for our metric friends, their ashes were swept out, and the bread was slapped directly onto the oven floor. It was a bit like pizza night in the suburbs, but with a lot more soot. The communal aspect wasn't just about sharing resources. It was a reflection of the economic realities and social structures of the time. Many of these bakers were freed slaves, known as liberty, who had managed to carve out a niche in the bustling economy of Rome. Owning and operating a bakery was one of the few avenues for economic advancement and social mobility available to them, and they took it seriously. These were small businesses in every sense, family-run operations where every member had a role to play. And let's not forget the economic backdrop against which all this kneading and baking played out. The price of bread was a daily headline, in a world where economic stability was as fragile as the freshly baked crust. The Roman state, ever the control freak, regulated the grain supply meticulously to prevent shortages. Bread was a political tool as much as it was a dietary staple, wielded by emperors to placate the hungry masses. Speaking of masses, let's tackle the myth of bread and circuses head-on. This idea that the Roman government placated its citizens with free bread and entertainment is one of history's catchiest sound bites. Yet, the reality was more nuanced. The circuses were indeed grand, but the bread part was less about largesse and more about necessity. The annona was a lifeline, sure, but it was also a leash, keeping the lower classes tethered to the whims of the state. While the elite indulged in their lavish feasts, the common Roman citizen queued for their grain dole, a stark reminder of the social divide. For those on the receiving end of this policy, life was far from the glamorous image of endless loaves and gladiator games. The bread they received was basic, often supplemented by whatever vegetables or legumes they could scrounge up. It was sustenance, not splendor. And when things got tight, say, if a grain shipment ran late or the harvest was poor, tensions would flare. Hungry people are not happy people, and the Romans knew it. Bread riots weren't just a possibility. They were a reality, one that could turn the city into a powder keg overnight. So as you ponder these layers of Roman life, think of the bakers, the pistors, standing at the intersection of economy, politics, and daily survival. Their loaves were more than just food. They were the embodiment of a society struggling to balance the scales of power and poverty. And as you continue your journey through the bustling streets of ancient Rome, remember that every morsel of bread carried the weight of history, each crumb a testament to the intricate dance of human ambition and necessity. Ah, the pistors, the unsung heroes of Roman society, grinding away at their querns, but they were far from lone wolves in this flower-filled saga. Enter the collegia, the guilds of ancient Rome, where bakers banded together to navigate the treacherous waters of politics and commerce. Imagine a union meeting with the aroma of freshly baked bread in the air. These guilds were more than just professional networks. They were the baker's lifeline in a society where even the humble loaf was subject to political machination. The guilds wielded considerable clout, acting as a collective voice that could influence everything from bread prices to labor laws. They were like the ancient version of a modern-day lobbying group, but with more dough and less red tape. These collegia ensured that bakers didn't just survive, but thrived in the cutthroat world of Roman trade. And let's be honest, in a city where the bread supply could make or break an emperor, you wanted to be on the right side of the pistors. Now, speaking of emperors, let's talk regulations. The Roman government, ever the micromanager, had an entire scroll of rules dedicated to bread production. We're talking weight standards, quality checks, and purity laws that would make your local health inspector blush. The Lex Claudia, for instance, dictated that each loaf had to weigh a precise amount. No room for cutting corners here. A loaf light on weight could lead to heavy penalties, so bakers had to be as precise as an architect drafting a blueprint for a villa. But where there are rules, there are those eager to bend them. Cue the bakers who dabbled in the dark arts of deception. Some unscrupulous pistors would add fillers like chalk or even sawdust to their dough to bulk up their loaves. Talk about getting more than you bargained for. It was a classic case of profit over principle, and while it sounds like a plot twist from a crime novel, it was just another day in the life of a Roman baker. The authorities, of course, were not amused, and the penalties for such culinary chicanery could be severe: fines, public shaming, or worse. The guilds played a role here too, policing their own ranks to maintain their reputation. They understood that one rotten loaf could spoil the bunch, tarnishing the collective image they worked so hard to cultivate. In a society where reputation was everything, the collegia enforced their own justice, sometimes more swiftly than the state. It was all about protecting the brand, even if the brand was a slab of bread with a mystery crunch. Sound familiar? Fast forward a couple of millennia, and the echoes of these ancient practices still resound in today's food industry. Modern food standards and regulations trace their roots back to these early Roman laws. The challenges of ensuring quality and fairness in the food supply remain remarkably similar, a testament to the enduring complexities of feeding a population. Whether it's Roman bakers slipping chalk into their dough or modern companies cutting corners to maximize profit, the dance between regulation and innovation is a tale as old as time. And let's delve into the cultural dynamics at play. Bakers weren't just producers, they were influencers of their time, albeit without the Instagram accounts. They held a respected place in the Roman social hierarchy, a notch above the average plebeian, but still navigating the tricky terrain of class divisions. This elevated status came with perks, but also responsibilities. They were expected to uphold the standards of the profession and maintain the delicate balance between supply and demand. It was a high-wire act, with the threat of public outrage looming large should they stumble. In this context, the guilds served as both a shield and a sword. They protected bakers from the whims of the market and the heavy hand of the law, while also wielding power to negotiate better terms for their members. It was a delicate dance, one that required skill, diplomacy, and no small measure of cunning. These were not just bakers, they were strategists, navigating a landscape as complex and layered as the loaves they crafted. But what of the bakers themselves? Many were former slaves, liberty who had clawed their way to freedom and seized the opportunity to shape their destinies. For them, baking was not just a trade. It was a chance to rewrite their narrative, to carve out a new identity in a society that often sought to pigeonhole them. The collegia offered a sense of belonging, a community where they could find support and camaraderie. It was a lifeline in a world that could be as unforgiving as a bad batch of dough. As you ponder these intricacies, consider the audacity of it all. The bakers who dared to flout the rules, the guilds that juggled power dynamics, and the state that sought to control it all. What a tapestry of ambition and adversity. And in the heart of it all, the humble loaf, a symbol of sustenance and struggle, of power and politics. So as you navigate the bustling streets of ancient Rome, remember that each loaf of bread tells a story of human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of survival. Our journey through Roman baking isn't over yet. With each bite, we're peeling back layers of history, uncovering the tales that lie hidden in the crust, and preparing to explore even more of the complex, deliciously intricate world that was ancient Rome. Stay tuned, because the next chapter promises to be as rich and rewarding as a well-kneaded dough. Now, as we dig deeper into this carb-loaded journey, let's chew on the cultural significance of bread in Roman life. This is just dough we're talking about. It's a cultural cornerstone. In Rome, bread was a symbol of civilization itself, a marker of progress from primitive grain grinding to the advanced culinary art of the empire. For Romans, bread wasn't just sustenance. It was a way of life, woven into the fabric of their society like the tunics they wore. Starting with the basics, bread had its place in religious rituals. The Romans were nothing if not devout, and their gods had appetites that rivaled those of the citizens. Bread was a common offering at temples, used in sacrifices to placate deities and ensure a bountiful harvest. Many a Roman priest would tell you that the quickest way to earn divine favor was through the stomach, or at least the offering plate. The Vestal Virgins, those keepers of the sacred flame and symbols of purity, used bread in their rituals to maintain the spiritual balance of the city. Roman art and literature also feasted on bread's symbolic weight. In mosaics and murals, bread appears as a staple of daily life and a symbol of hospitality. The poet Virgil might not have written the Aeneid about loaves and crusts, but bread sneaks into the narrative of Roman literature as a metaphor for sustenance and abundance. You could say that a Roman feast wasn't truly depicted unless there was a basket of bread in the corner, quietly asserting its presence. But let's not get too swept away by these idyllic depictions. Amid all this poetic waxing, there lies a stark contrast between the idealized images of opulent Roman feasts and the daily grind for the average citizen. Picture this: the elite lounging on their triclinia, indulging in multi-course meals that would make a modern buffet blush. Meanwhile, the everyday Roman was more likely to dine on a modest meal of bread, olives, and maybe some fish if they were lucky. Their reality was a far cry from the lush banquets immortalized in frescoes. The socio-economic divide in Rome was as pronounced as the flavor difference between a fresh loaf and a stale crust. The wealthy, with their villas and vineyards, enjoyed access to a variety of foods, often flaunting their status through elaborate dinners that doubled as social events. Bread for them was just one course among many. For the ordinary Roman, however, bread was often the main event. The panis plebeius, common bread for common people, was a staple filling stomachs, if not satisfying culinary aspirations. It was bread that filled the bellies of soldiers, workers, and citizens alike, a humble yet essential sustenance. This divide wasn't just a matter of preference. It was an economic reality. The price of grain could fluctuate wildly with the political winds, turning bread into a luxury on a whim. Grain shortages were enough to send the city into a panic, and bread riots were as much a part of Roman life as the Forum itself. The elite might have had the luxury to ride out such crises with their pantries well stocked. But for the average citizen, a disruption in the grain supply could mean the difference between a full belly and an empty one. And let's not forget the political implications. Bread was a tool of power, wielded by emperors to curry favor or quell unrest. The annona, that state-sponsored grain dole we've mentioned, was as much about control as it was about charity. The government used bread as a means to keep the populace placated, a wedge between potential chaos and the fragile peace of the city. A well-fed citizen was a content citizen, or at least a less rebellious one. But in all this, bread also represented a shared experience, a commonality that linked the Roman populace across classes and circumstance. It was the glue that bound society together, a daily reminder of both the abundance and the limits of Rome's resources. And while the rich might have had their feasts, and the poor their simple meals, everyone, at the end of the day, relied on bread as the staff of life. So, as you continue to wander through the bustling streets of ancient Rome, take a moment to reflect on the loaf of bread you might pass by in a marketplace stall. That unassuming loaf carries with it stories of power and poverty, of religion and art, of the grand and the mundane. It's a testament to the complexities of Roman life, a symbol of both the empire's achievements and its struggles. The next time you break bread, be it a baguette, ciabatta, or panis quadratus, consider the layers of history within each slice. From the gods who demanded it, to the artists who depicted it, to the citizens who relied on it, bread was more than just food in Rome. It was a narrative, a symbol of survival and society. And as our exploration of ancient Roman baking continues, remember, each crumb is a piece of the past, a morsel of the vast, rich tapestry of life in one of history's greatest empires. Stay tuned, because the story of bread in Rome has more to reveal, and our journey is far from over. But don't let the crumbs of history slip through your fingers just yet. As the final chapter of our carb-laden saga unfolds, let's pull apart the layers of Roman baking's legacy, one that echoes through time like a well-baked crust, snapping beneath a knife. First up, Roman innovation wasn't just about the bread, but the entire shebang surrounding it. These folks were the original logistics wizards, orchestrating a grain supply network that spanned continents. Picture this. Vast shipments of Egyptian grain sailing across the Mediterranean, a journey of some 1,500 miles, all to keep Rome's insatiable appetite for bread satisfied. The Romans didn't just build roads. They built trade routes that laid the groundwork for future empires. They were the trailblazers of international commerce, showing the world that a city could be fed not just by its own fields, but by the bounty of distant lands. A lesson in globalization that modern economies can't ignore. But let's talk technique. Roman bakers weren't just rolling the dice with dough, they were perfecting craft. Their use of sourdough starters, known as fermentum, was ahead of its time, giving bread a tangy flavor and longer shelf life. And let's not forget those communal ovens, the OG shared economy before Uber and Airbnb made it cool. These ovens were efficient, sustainable, and a central part of community life. The idea of shared resources and communal baking spaces is one that modern urban planners are revisiting today, albeit with fewer togas and more soy lattes. And as we delve into the past, a little myth-busting is in order. It's tempting to picture Roman baking as a quaint, artisanal affair, but the reality was more industrial than you'd think. With a population of over 1 million at its peak, Rome's demand for bread required mass production techniques that would put even the most ambitious sourdough hobbyist to shame. The sheer scale of operations was staggering, with estimates suggesting that a typical Roman bakery churned out hundreds of loaves daily. It was a culinary assembly line long before Henry Ford turned it into a business model. Now, what does this ancient bread story tell us about today? For starters, the Romans knew a thing or two about food security and sustainability. Their entire grain distribution system was a masterclass in resilience. No small feat when your city teetered on the brink of famine with each failed harvest or delayed shipment. Modern society grapples with similar challenges, from climate change to supply chain vulnerabilities. If Rome's history teaches us anything, it's the importance of planning for the unexpected, a reminder that the breadbasket of an empire must be both robust and flexible. And speaking of flexibility, let's not overlook the politics woven into the crusts of this tale. Bread was a tool wielded by emperors not just to feed, but to control. The Annona system, as we've seen, was more about maintaining order than benevolence. It was statecraft through sustenance, a lesson in political pragmatism that modern leaders might do well to digest. The idea that food can be both a gift and a leash is as relevant now as it was then, raising questions about power dynamics in today's food aid programs and social safety nets. But let's not romanticize these lessons as mere curiosities of a bygone era. Roman baking is a testament to human ingenuity and adaptation, a reminder that even the simplest staple, humble bread, can be a catalyst for change. As we face an uncertain future, grappling with challenges that span borders and generations, the legacy of Roman bakers whispers a timeless truth. Resilience is baked into the very fabric of civilization. So as you mull over these golden nuggets of history, let the romance of Rome's past mingle with the gritty reality of its present. A city of splendor and struggle, where innovation met necessity on every street corner. The Romans weren't just feeding a city. They were feeding the future, laying a foundation upon which countless societies would build. And as you break bread today, remember that each slice carries with it the weight of history, a taste of the past, a morsel of the enduring human spirit. And there you have it, dear listener. Our journey through the flower-dusted streets of ancient Rome draws to a close. We've kneaded our way through Roman baking, unpacking the myths, savoring the realities, and unearthing the lessons that echo down the ages. So next time you find yourself reaching for a loaf, take a moment to appreciate the story it tells, a story as rich and complex as the empire that baked it. Until next time, keep your appetite for knowledge as hearty as a Roman's hunger for bread. Cyrus the Great didn't just stroll onto the stage of history. He crashed the party like a rock star with a penchant for empire building. Born around 600 BCE, this guy had ambition in his DNA. By 559 BCE, he was ready to seize the throne of the Achaemenid Empire, a small kingdom that would soon rival the greatest powers of the ancient world. You know, just a typical underdog story. If your average underdog had a knack for military strategy and a gift for diplomacy. Cyrus wasn't just about flexing military might, though he did have that in spades. His first big move, taking on the Medes, who were basically the local bullies on the block. Led by Astyages, the Medes had been dominating the scene, and most folks thought challenging them would be like trying to take down a bear with a toothpick. But Cyrus, he saw opportunity. He united the Persians and launched a rebellion that flipped the script. By 550 BCE, Astyages was not just out of power. He was out of a job, and Cyrus was the one holding the keys to the kingdom. Now, let's talk about Cyrus' strategic genius for a moment. He didn't win battles just by charging ahead with brute force. He was a master of the ancient PR campaign, spreading tales of his righteousness and benevolence to win over the hearts and minds of his new subjects. This guy knew that ruling through fear was so passé. He was all about that sweet, sweet loyalty. He even let local leaders keep their positions as long as they pledged allegiance to him. Not exactly your typical imperial overlord move, but hey, it worked. With the Medes and Persians united under his rule, Cyrus turned his gaze toward Lydia, led by the fabulously wealthy Croesus. Croesus was famous for his riches, and when you're an empire on the rise, nothing says, "I've made it," like annexing a kingdom swimming in gold. Cyrus marched into Lydia, and after a series of skirmishes, captured Sardis in 546 BCE. Croesus learned the hard way not to underestimate a guy who could unite tribes and topple empires before breakfast. But Cyrus wasn't done yet. Next on his list was Babylon. Now, Babylon wasn't just any city. It was the Asterisk City. Known for its hanging gardens and legendary walls, this place was the ancient world's version of a bustling metropolis. Nabonidus, the Babylonian king, probably didn't expect Cyrus to show up on his doorstep, but that's precisely what happened in 539 BCE. And Cyrus didn't just storm the gates. He orchestrated one of history's most dramatic regime changes with barely a whimper of resistance. The Babylonians were, frankly, a bit tired of Nabonidus, who had been more interested in moon worship than ruling efficiently. Cyrus walked in like a hero in shining armor, promising respect for local customs and religions. A savvy move that earned him the title of the King of all lands from his new subjects. Let's pause here to appreciate the audacity. Cyrus wasn't just building an empire, he was crafting a brand. He understood the power of narrative, portraying himself as a liberator rather than a conqueror. It's no wonder he was admired by many, including the ancient historian Herodotus, who couldn't help but gush over Cyrus' charisma and strategic brilliance. But how did Cyrus make all this happen? Well, it wasn't just his knack for diplomacy or military genius. Economic savvy played a huge role. By controlling trade routes and fostering economic growth, he ensured his empire was as rich as it was vast. The Persians developed an efficient system of roads and postal services that would put your local mailman to shame. This infrastructure not only facilitated trade, but also allowed for quicker military deployments and communication across the sprawling empire. Of course, no empire is built without some less than savory realities. The romantic vision of Cyrus as a benevolent ruler glosses over the fact that empire building often involved a fair amount of coercion and conflict. The Persians, like any imperial power, had their share of battles and bloodshed. But Cyrus' ability to minimize violence while maximizing integration was part of what made him a legend. He didn't just conquer. He assimilated, absorbing the cultures and administrative practices of those he defeated, and in doing so, built a foundation for what would become one of history's greatest empires. In conclusion, the rise of the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great wasn't just a tale of military conquests and territorial expansion. It was a masterclass in leadership, strategy, and the art of empire building. From humble beginnings, Cyrus crafted a legacy that would influence civilizations for centuries. And while the stories might gloss over the gritty details, the reality is clear. Cyrus the Great was a game-changer, and his empire was just getting started. As Cyrus the Great's legacy loomed large, the Persian Empire didn't just rest on its laurels. Enter Darius I, the administrative genius with a penchant for order that would make even the neatest of neat freaks nod in approval. If Cyrus was the empire's charismatic founder, then Darius was its meticulous architect, constructing an imperial structure so sound it could have survived a biblical flood. Born in 550 BCE, Darius was a distant cousin to Cyrus, and when he ascended to the throne in 522 BCE, he faced the daunting task of ruling over a sprawling empire that spanned continents and cultures like a geographical patchwork quilt. Now, let's talk about Darius' genius for administration. This guy took the empire's chaos and turned it into a well-oiled machine. Think of him as the ancient world's efficiency expert, the kind who put a modern corporate consultant to shame. His first order of business: divide and conquer, administratively, that is. Darius carved the empire into about 20 satrapies, or provinces, each ruled by a satrap, which is a fancy word for governor. These satraps were like mini-kings, complete with their own courts and armies, but they reported directly to Darius. It was a brilliant move that allowed him to keep tabs on his far-flung territories without having to personally micromanage every detail. Talk about a perfect delegation. But Darius didn't stop there. To make sure his satraps weren't getting any funny ideas about independence, he established a network of spies known as the King's Eyes and Ears. These were the original secret shoppers, ensuring the satraps stayed loyal and the taxes kept rolling in. Speaking of taxes, Darius was a master at squeezing revenue out of his empire. He standardized taxation, making it as unavoidable as rush-hour traffic. Each satrapy had to pay a fixed annual tribute, which was a pretty savvy way to keep the empire's coffers full without causing a rebellion every time tax collectors came knocking. And let's not forget the piece de resistance of Darius' administrative brilliance, the Royal Road. Stretching over 1,600 miles from Sardis in modern-day Turkey to Susa in Iran, this road was the ancient equivalent of a superhighway. It allowed for fast communication. Messages could travel across the empire in less than a week, a speed that would make even Amazon Prime envious. This road wasn't just for messages. It facilitated trade, troop movements, and cultural exchanges, knitting the empire together like a sturdy Persian rug. But Darius wasn't just about paperwork and infrastructure. He had a taste for conquest, too, and his eyes were set on expanding the empire further. One of his most famous campaigns was against the Scythians, a nomadic tribe from the steppes north of the Black Sea. Now here's where things get a bit mythical. The story goes that Darius, frustrated by the Scythians' hit-and-run tactics, sent them a message demanding submission. The Scythians' response: a gift of a bird, a mouse, a frog, and 5 arrows. Ancient historians love to spin this tale as a symbol-laden riddle. But in reality, it was more like the Scythians giving Darius the ancient version of a middle finger. Despite the Scythians' cheeky defiance, Darius' campaign against them wasn't exactly a smashing success. The Scythians, with their guerrilla tactics and knowledge of the terrain, were as elusive as a Wi-Fi signal in a bunker. Darius eventually withdrew, and while the campaign wasn't a total failure, it taught him that some lands were more trouble than they were worth. This episode is a reminder that even the greatest military minds sometimes meet their match in the unpredictability of warfare. Back at home, Darius continued to strengthen his empire. He introduced a new currency, the daric, a gold coin that became the standard across the empire. This wasn't just about making transactions easier. It was about creating a unified economic system that enhanced trade and prosperity. In fact, Darius' economic reforms were so effective that they fueled the empire's golden age, a time when Persian wealth and culture flourished like never before. But before we get too starry-eyed about Darius' achievements, let's remember that ruling an empire wasn't all sunshine and roses. Darius faced numerous revolts during his reign, each requiring a delicate balance of diplomacy and force to quell. His ability to maintain control over such a vast and diverse empire is a testament to his leadership, but it also highlights the constant tension between central authority and local autonomy. And then there's the matter of Darius' legacy. While he didn't have the same charismatic flair as Cyrus, Darius' contributions were no less significant. He left behind an empire that was not only larger but more connected and cohesive than ever before. His administrative innovations laid the groundwork for future empires, and his emphasis on infrastructure and economic stability created a template that will be emulated for centuries. In the grand tapestry of history, Darius I emerges as a figure of immense importance. He was the empire's unsung hero, the strategist who turned the chaotic conquests of his predecessors into a sustainable system of governance. Through his efforts, the Persian Empire became not just a collection of territories, but a unified entity with a shared identity and purpose. As we leave Darius' reign and prepare to delve into the next chapter of Persian history, let's take a moment to appreciate the enduring impact of his rule. His story is a reminder that while charisma can build an empire, it's the grind of good governance that keeps it standing strong. And with that, the stage is set for the next act in the epic saga of the Persian Empire. Stay tuned, because the story of ancient Persia is far from over. As the curtain rises on the next act of the Persian epic, we find ourselves in the bustling heart of the empire, where trade routes crisscross like the threads of an intricate tapestry. This is an empire at its zenith, a multicultural melting pot where goods, ideas, and people flow as freely as the mighty rivers that carve their way through the land. If you think globalization is a modern invention, think again. Darius I and his successors were the original architects of the interconnected world. Let's start with the trade routes, the ancient world's version of the internet. The Royal Road, which we hinted at earlier, was the crown jewel of Persian infrastructure. Spanning over 1,600 miles, it was the Silk Road's older, less glamorous sibling. Sure, the name Silk Road conjures images of exotic caravans and mysterious merchants, but in reality, trading wasn't all that romantic. Imagine long, grueling journeys on bumpy camel rides, where the biggest thrill was not losing your cargo to bandits or a sudden sandstorm. Yet this network was vital, facilitating trade from the Aegean Sea to the Indus Valley. Goods like spices, textiles, and yes, silk, exchanged hands, creating a vibrant economy that was the envy of the ancient world. Speaking of economy, let's talk currency. Darius, I introduced the Daric, a gold coin that wasn't just shiny, but also revolutionary. It standardized the empire's economic system, making transactions smoother than a Persian rug. This little gold disc, weighing about 8 grams, became the Bitcoin of its day. Everybody wanted it. Everybody needed it. But unlike today's cryptocurrencies, the Daric was backed by the full faith and credit of the Persian Empire, not just the whims of the market. Inflation. They had it under control before it was cool. However, managing such a vast economy wasn't without its challenges. Budget balancing was as much a headache then as it is now. Darius and his successors faced the perennial problem of ensuring that the empire's expenditures didn't outpace its revenues. They had to be as crafty as any modern finance minister, squeezing taxes out of their satrapies while keeping resistance at bay. It's a tightrope act worthy of any circus. But hold on, let's not forget the multicultural fabric that made this empire tick. The Persian Empire was like the ultimate social experiment, bringing together a dizzying array of cultures, languages, and religions. It was a veritable United Nations of the ancient world, sans the annoying paperwork. Here, Egyptians rubbed shoulders with Babylonians, and Greeks traded philosophies with Indians. This cultural diversity was both a strength and a challenge. It enriched the empire, infusing it with a kaleidoscope of traditions and ideas. Yet, it also required a deft hand to manage, ensuring that this mosaic didn't fracture into 1,000 pieces. One of the myths that often gets romanticized is the idea of cultural harmony. In reality, managing such diversity was akin to herding cats. The Persians had to be shrewd, allowing local customs to flourish while ensuring loyalty to the central authority. It was a delicate dance, a balancing act of appeasement and control. But let's give credit where it's due. They managed to pull it off for centuries, a testament to their savvy governance. Now, let's zoom in on the socio-economic realities of the time. The empire's wealth wasn't just built on trade and taxes. It had a robust agricultural base. The fertile lands of Mesopotamia, the breadbasket of the empire, produced vast quantities of grain, supporting both the local population and the army. This agricultural bounty was the empire's safety net, its insurance policy against famine and economic downturns. Yet, for all its wealth, the Persian Empire wasn't immune to economic woes. Inflation, that pesky spectre that haunts economies to this day, was a constant threat. As the empire expanded, so did its expenses. The cost of maintaining roads, paying soldiers, and constructing grandiose palaces added up. The rulers had to be ever vigilant, tweaking taxes, adjusting trade policies, and occasionally minting more coins to keep the economy afloat. It's a story that, despite the centuries, feels all too familiar. In this grand tapestry, the ordinary people played their part too. The artisans, traders, and farmers who toiled day in and day out were the unsung heroes of the empire. They didn't just contribute to the economy, they were the economy. Without their labor, the empire's glittering facade would have crumbled. Their lives, though often overlooked in grand historical narratives, were woven into the very fabric of Persian society. And let's not overlook the role of women. While the Persian Empire was a man's world, women weren't just sitting on the sidelines. They wielded significant influence, especially within the royal court. Queens and noblewomen often played crucial roles in politics and diplomacy, demonstrating that power wasn't strictly a boys' club. As we wrap up this exploration of the socio-economic engine that powered the Persian Empire, it's clear that this ancient juggernaut was as complex as any modern state. Its success lay in its ability to adapt, innovate, and integrate. The empire thrived because it embraced diversity, harnessed the power of trade, and navigated the choppy waters of economics with a deft hand. But don't pack up your history books just yet. There's more to come. The story of ancient Persia is far from over, and the next chapter promises even more intrigue, drama, and of course, a few unexpected twists. As we journey forward, let's carry with us the lessons of an empire that wasn't just a relic of the past, but a blueprint for the future. Stay tuned, because the fascinating saga of the Persian Empire is about to take another thrilling turn. As the sun sets on the Persian Empire's golden age of trade and cultural harmony, storm clouds gather on the horizon, and they look suspiciously Greek-shaped. You see, our ancient Persian pals, basking in their multicultural empire, were about to have a rude awakening from their Mediterranean neighbors. Enter stage left, the Greco-Persian Wars. Grab your helmets and sandals, folks, because things are about to get epic. Let's kick things off with a little background, shall we? The Persian Empire, under the watchful eye of Darius I, was feeling pretty invincible. They had the roads, the coins, and the trade routes to prove it. But in 499 BCE, the Ionian revolt threw a wrench into their well-oiled machine. This was essentially the Greek cities in Asia Minor giving the Persian Empire the ancient equivalent of a talk to the hand. They were tired of Persian taxes and wanted a bit more autonomy, so they decided to rebel. Spoiler alert. This did not go down well with Darius. Now, Darius wasn't a man to let a rebellion slide. He crushed the revolt with the kind of efficiency that would make a modern CEO weep with envy. But the Greeks, particularly those pesky Athenians, had lent the Ionians some support. This was a classic case of poking the bear, except this bear had a penchant for empire building and a long memory. Darius, not one to forgive and forget, decided it was time to teach the Athenians a lesson. Cue the Persian Wars, a clash of civilizations that would echo through history like a particularly dramatic drum solo. In 490 BCE, the Persians made their move, landing on the Greek mainland with a force that Herodotus, the ancient historian, claims numbered 600 ships. While Herodotus might have been prone to a bit of exaggeration, think of him as the ancient world's version of a tabloid reporter, the Persians definitely meant business. Their target, the city of Marathon, just a hop, skip, and a chariot ride from Athens. The Battle of Marathon is one of those legendary tales that has everything: bravery, strategy, and enough drama to fill a Hollywood blockbuster. Speaking of which, let's take a moment to roll our eyes at how Hollywood has played fast and loose with the facts. You might think of this battle as a scene from 300, with chiseled warriors and slow-motion combat. But in reality, it was less about abs and more about tactics. The Greeks, vastly outnumbered, pulled off a stunning victory using a clever strategy. Instead of waiting for the Persians to come to them, they charged the enemy lines. The Athenian general Miltiades, who clearly had a knack for battlefield innovation, stretched his forces thin on the flanks while keeping the center strong. When the Persians broke through the middle, the Greek wings closed in like a trap, and the Persian forces were routed. It was a military masterstroke, one that saw the Persians fleeing back to their ships, leaving behind thousands of their own dead. And here's where we debunk another myth, the famous Marathon run. Legend has it that a messenger named Phidippides ran from Marathon to Athens, a distance of about 26 miles, to deliver the news of victory, only to collapse and die from exhaustion. While this tale is charming and has inspired countless modern marathons, the reality is a bit murkier. The ancient sources are contradictory, and the whole running-to-death story seems suspiciously like a later embellishment. But hey, it makes for a good story, and who are we to deny the allure of a heroic tale? With Marathon behind them, you might think the Greeks would kick back and celebrate with some feta and olives. But the Persians, under the new leadership of Xerxes I Darius' son, weren't done yet. Xerxes was determined to succeed where his father had failed, and he wasn't going to let a little thing like the Aegean Sea stop him. In 480 BCE, he launched a massive invasion, reportedly assembling an army of over 100,000 troops and a fleet of 1,200 ships. This was not just a military campaign. It was a full-blown Persian roadshow. Xerxes' forces marched through Greece, meeting resistance from a small band of Spartans at the now legendary Battle of Thermopylae. Led by King Leonidas, the 300 Spartans, and a few thousand other Greek allies, because let's not forget them, made a heroic last stand. Hollywood loves to portray this as a battle of brave underdogs versus a monolithic Persian force. But in reality, it was a strategically brilliant delaying action that allowed the Greeks to regroup and prepare for the battles to come. Thermopylae was a tactical defeat, but a strategic victory for the Greeks. It bought them time and inspired a sense of unity among the often fractious Greek city-states. While the Persian juggernaut continued to roll south, things weren't as rosy as they appeared for Xerxes. His supply lines were stretched thin, and his forces were far from home, fighting on unfamiliar terrain. Then came the Battle of Salamis, another Greek triumph that turned the tide of the war. The Greeks, with their smaller, more maneuverable ships, lured the Persian fleet into the narrow straits of Salamis. It was a classic case of brains over brawn. The Persians, their larger ships struggling to maneuver, were decimated. Xerxes, watching from a throne on the shore, reportedly saw his navy and his dreams of conquest go up in flames. But what was really at stake in these battles? Beyond the clashing swords and the stirring speeches, this was a conflict of ideologies. The Greeks prized their independence, their city-states each with its own identity and governance. The Persians, on the other hand, represented a sprawling, centralized empire. This wasn't just about land and power, it was a battle for the soul of Greece. Now, let's dispel another myth. The idea that the Greeks were the scrappy underdogs fighting against a tyrannical empire. The Persian Empire, for all its might, was remarkably tolerant and diverse. They allowed a degree of autonomy for their subjects and respected local customs and religions. In fact, many Greek cities within the empire flourished under Persian rule, enjoying economic prosperity and cultural exchange. The Persian influence on Greek culture was significant, despite the conflict. Trade continued between the two worlds, and ideas flowed back and forth like water through a sieve. The Greeks adopted aspects of Persian fashion, art, and even military tactics. This cross-pollination enriched both cultures, creating a legacy that would shape the ancient world. As the Persian wars drew to a close, the Greeks had secured their independence, but the cost was high. The battles had left deep scars, both physically and psychologically. Yet these conflicts forged a new sense of unity among the Greek city-states, setting the stage for the golden age of Athens and the rise of democracy. So, as we wrap up this chapter, let's take a moment to appreciate the complex tapestry of history. The Greco-Persian Wars were not just a series of battles, but a clash of civilizations, each with its own strengths and flaws. They were a reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's a kaleidoscope of perspectives, each adding its own shade to the story. But don't hang up your toga just yet. The Persian saga is far from over. There's more intrigue, more power struggles, and yes, more ancient drama to come. So stay tuned as we dive deeper into the fascinating world of the Persian Empire and its enduring legacy. As the ink of the Persian Wars dried on history's scroll, the Persian Empire, sprawling over 3 continents, was about to face its own internal demons. If the Greeks were the storm battering the empire from the outside, the real tempest was brewing within. You see, an empire isn't just built on conquests, it's sustained by the delicate art of governance. And as the Persians would soon discover, that art can be as slippery as a greased-up eel. Let's kick things off with a bit of family drama, because no history tale is complete without some royal intrigue. The Achaemenid throne was a hot seat, with family members eyeing it with the same fervor you might reserve for the last slice of pizza. After Xerxes was assassinated in 465 BCE, the empire saw a revolving door of rulers, each with their own baggage and ambitions. Artaxerxes I, Darius II, and Artaxerxes II all took their turn, but the empire's stability was already on shaky ground. And speaking of instability, let's talk about the price of power. Running an empire wasn't cheap. The cost of maintaining vast armies, building monumental palaces, and keeping the satrapies, those administrative provinces, in line was astronomical. Each new ruler was faced with the daunting task of balancing the empire's budget, a challenge that would make even the most seasoned accountants break out in a cold sweat. The daric, once the gold standard of the empire, was stretched thin as expenses piled up faster than an influencer's credit card bill. But wait, there's more. The empire's social fabric, once a tapestry of unity, began to fray. The satraps, those provincial governors with a taste for power, started flexing their muscles. Some even entertained notions of independence, like rebellious teenagers testing the limits of parental patience. The central authority in Persepolis found itself increasingly sidelined, as local rulers prioritized their own interests over the empire's collective good. It was a classic case of too many cooks in the kitchen, and the resulting dish was a recipe for chaos. Then there's the small matter of rebellions. The empire's diverse population, while a strength in times of prosperity, became a liability when dissatisfaction brewed. The Egyptians, for instance, were perpetually displeased with Persian rule, revolting multiple times with the enthusiasm of a toddler refusing nap time. These uprisings were costly to suppress, draining resources and diverting attention from more pressing matters. It's a reminder that ruling through fear and force only works until the fear fades and the force runs out. But the final nail in the Persian coffin came courtesy of a young Macedonian with a penchant for world domination. Say hello to Alexander the Great, a man whose ambition was as boundless as his military prowess. In 336 BCE, he ascended to the Macedonian throne, and by 334 BCE, he was crossing into Asia Minor with an army eager for conquest. The Persians, under the rule of Darius III, were unprepared for the whirlwind that was Alexander. Despite their numerical superiority, the Persian forces were no match for Alexander's strategic brilliance and charismatic leadership. The Battle of Issus in 333 BCE was a turning point. Alexander, outnumbered but not outmatched, delivered a crushing defeat to Darius III. The Persian king fled the battlefield, leaving his family and his imperial dignity behind. It was a humbling moment for the once mighty empire, and it signaled the beginning of the end. The subsequent battles, like the famous showdown at Gorgamla in 331 BCE, only cemented Alexander's dominance. Darius III's efforts to regroup were too little, too late. In 330 BCE, he met a tragic end, assassinated by one of his own satraps while fleeing the Macedonian juggernaut. With Darius III out of the picture, Alexander waltzed into Persepolis like he owned the place, because, well, he pretty much did. The burning of Persepolis, whether a calculated political statement or a drunken accident, was a fiery symbol of the empire's downfall. The Achaemenid dynasty, which had once ruled from the Aegean to the Indus, was now reduced to ashes and memories. But let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The Persian Empire, for all its challenges and eventual collapse, left an indelible mark on history. Their administrative innovations, like the satrapy system, influenced future empires, including the Roman and Byzantine. The royal road, an ancient precursor to modern highways, demonstrated the power of infrastructure in binding vast territories together. And their cultural legacy, a rich tapestry of art, architecture, and religion, continued to inspire long after the empire's fall. The Zoroastrian religion, with its dualistic worldview and emphasis on moral choice, left a philosophical imprint that resonated through the ages. Concepts of good versus evil and the struggle for righteousness found their way into later religious and ethical systems. This spiritual dimension of the Persian legacy is often overshadowed by their imperial achievements, but it's a profound reminder of the empire's lasting influence. And let's not forget the Persians' knack for diplomacy and tolerance. Their approach to governance, which allowed for a degree of local autonomy and cultural preservation, was ahead of its time. While not without its flaws, this model of empire building offered lessons in coexistence and respect for diversity, principles that modern states continue to grapple with today. So, what can we learn from the rise and fall of the Persian Empire? It's a tale of ambition and hubris, of innovation and adaptation. The Persians were masters of empire building, but ultimately fell victim to the same forces they had once harnessed. Their story is a testament to the complexity of human societies, where power is both a tool and a trap, and where the seeds of greatness often carry the potential for decline. As we close the book on the Persian Empire, let's remember that history is not just a series of dates and battles. It's a reflection of human nature, with all its triumphs and tragedies, its wisdom and folly. The Persians, like all great empires, left behind a legacy both glorious and cautionary. And in their story, we find echoes of our own, reminding us that the past is never truly gone. It's just waiting for us to listen. In the bustling heart of what we now call Mexico City, once stood a metropolis that could put any modern urban planner to shame. Welcome to Tenochtitlan, the Aztec Empire's crown jewel. Forget the image of a ragtag group of warriors running around in loincloths. What we have here is a society as organized and complex as any medieval European kingdom. The Aztecs didn't just show up and hope for the best. They meticulously crafted an empire that ran like a well-oiled machine, albeit one powered by cocoa beans and human hearts. Now, let's talk mythical narratives for a moment. The noble savage trope has been a favorite for centuries, painting indigenous peoples as pure, untouched by the complexities of civilization. As romantic as that sounds, it's about as accurate as a history exam written by someone who thinks the Renaissance was a new brand of pasta. The Aztecs were anything but simple, and they had a social structure that was as layered as your grandmother's lasagna. At the top of this societal pyramid sat the Huey T. Latuni, the Great Speaker or Emperor. It's a title that sounds like a lot of fun, until you realize it involves less lounging in feathered headdresses and more playing a high-stakes game of don't get sacrificed by your own people. With power came the responsibility of managing not just the affairs of the state, but also the delicate balance of keeping the gods happy, which in Aztec terms often meant ensuring a steady supply of sacrificial victims. Yes, nothing says job security, quite like appeasing a deity with a penchant for human hearts. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Below the emperor were the nobles, the Pipiltin, who acted as the empire's bureaucratic backbone. Think of them as the ancient version of your local government officials, but with better hats. These guys had land, power, and the ear of the emperor. They were the ones making sure the empire's gears kept turning smoothly, sort of like the executive assistants who actually run the office while the boss takes all the credit. Then we have the Pochdecker, the merchant class. Now, these folks were the real MVPs of the Aztec economy. They didn't just trade in beans and feathers. They were the international business moguls of their day, dealing in exotic goods from as far away as Central America. If you wanted a luxury item in Tenochtitlan, you had to go through these guys. They weren't just traders. They were also intelligence gatherers, bringing back valuable information from their travels. Think James Bond with a side hustle in textiles. Moving down the ladder, we find the Macehualtin, the commoners, who made up the bulk of the society. These were the farmers, the builders, and the artisans, the backbone of the empire's labor force. They lived by the principle of work hard, pay your taxes, and try not to get caught in the next round of sacrifices. It wasn't glamorous, but at least they had a place in the structure, which is more than can be said for the Tlahtlacotin, or slaves. Slavery in the Aztec world wasn't exactly a life sentence. It was more of a social safety net gone wrong, where you could fall into it through debt, crime, or just plain bad luck. And before you start picturing chains and whips, let's set the record straight. Aztec slavery wasn't about perpetual doom. Many could earn their freedom through hard work or buying their way out. It's the kind of system that makes you question who's really enslaved, the person working off a debt or the one drowning in modern-day credit card bills. So, while the Aztec social structure had all the makings of a well-conceived social order, it was also a pressure cooker of expectations and obligations. The emperor might have worn the biggest feathered crown, but his responsibilities weighed as heavily as a stone temple. It was a society where everyone had a role to play, and woe betide anyone who forgot theirs. This was not a land of noble savages living in a simplistic paradise. It was a complex, highly organized society that laid the groundwork for what could have been a modern empire had history taken a different turn. Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning of a fascinating journey through the layers of Aztec society, where myths are debunked, realities are harsher, and the past is far more colorful than any Hollywood script. And speaking of colorful, let's dive into the world of Aztec commerce, where the currency was as delicious as it was valuable: cocoa beans. Yes, you heard right. Those little nuggets of joy that modern society now drowns in milk and sugar were once the economic lifeblood of an empire. Imagine a world where your morning mocha was a form of legal tender. But before you start dreaming of Willy Wonka-esque vaults filled with cocoa cash, let's get real about how this worked in practice. The Aztecs were no strangers to trade, and they certainly weren't just a bunch of warriors swinging obsidian swords in the jungle. They were sophisticated traders, with Tenochtitlan sitting at the center of a vast network of exchange routes that would put even the Silk Road to shame. Picture bustling marketplaces, where everything from jade and obsidian to exotic feathers, and yes, cocoa beans, changed hands faster than you could say, Huitzilopochtli. These marketplaces were the beating hearts of Aztec cities, the ancient equivalent of your local mall, minus the food court, but with significantly more human sacrifices as background entertainment. The Grand Tlatelolco market was the largest of its kind, a sprawling hub of economic activity that could see upwards of 60,000 people on a busy day. That's like the entire population of a small city showing up to haggle over goods ranging from food to finery. It was here that cocoa beans truly shone as the preferred currency for everyday transactions. You could buy a tamale for a few beans or go all out and purchase a rabbit for about 30. Inflation, more like flavor appreciation. And let's not forget the Pochdecker, the merchant class who were the Aztec equivalent of Wall Street brokers, but with more llamas and less insider trading. These intrepid traders didn't just stick to the familiar roads. They ventured deep into the unknown, establishing trade routes that stretched from the deserts of the American Southwest to the rainforests of Central America. Their caravans, led by llamas and often guarded by warriors, were the ancient version of Amazon Prime, delivering goods with surprising efficiency, minus the 2-day shipping guarantee. Now, it's a tempting myth to imagine the Aztecs as mere conquerors, but their economic strategies reveal a society that valued trade as much as they did warfare. They understood that a well-stocked granary was just as important as a well-equipped army. This was a civilization that knew the value of diversification long before it became a buzzword in modern financial circles. And while the stories of fierce warriors and blood-drenched altars capture the imagination, it's the tales of trade and commerce that truly unlock the secrets of Aztec resilience and prosperity. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing down these trade routes. The Aztecs faced the same challenges that plague economies today: supply chain disruptions, fluctuating market demands, and the occasional llama rebellion. But they had a knack for problem-solving that involved less bureaucracy and more direct action. Think swift negotiations or the strategic application of military might to ensure compliance. It's the kind of economic diplomacy that would have made even Machiavelli nod in approval. Now, let's not sugarcoat it, literally or metaphorically. The Aztecs' reliance on trade and cocoa beans didn't mean everyone was living in a chocolate-coated paradise. Economic disparity was as much a reality then as it is now. While the nobles and merchants enjoyed the finer things in life, the commoners often had to make do with the basics, and the slaves, well, they were lucky to get a taste at all. The empire's wealth was unevenly distributed, a reminder that even the most sophisticated systems can leave some folks out in the cold, or in this case, the tropical heat. But beyond the raw numbers and the bustling markets, what truly stands out is the Aztec capacity for adaptation and innovation. They took what they had, cocoa beans, llamas, and a strategic location, and turned it into an economic powerhouse. Not bad for a civilization often reduced to stereotypes of bloodthirsty warriors. The reality is far more nuanced and, dare I say, inspiring. It's a testament to human ingenuity and the unyielding pursuit of prosperity, wrapped in a narrative as rich and complex as the darkest chocolate. And as we continue to unravel the layers of Aztec life, it becomes increasingly clear that this civilization was more than just a footnote in history. It was a vibrant, dynamic society that thrived on complexity and contradiction. where trade and tribute went hand in hand, and every cocoa bean was a tiny ambassador of the empire's reach and influence. The Aztecs didn't just survive, they thrived, leaving behind a legacy as enduring as the allure of chocolate itself. So, as we pause at this bustling market of history, it's clear that the Aztecs were not merely warriors. They were economic architects of a civilization that was as robust as it was intricate. Stay tuned, because the tale of the Aztec Empire is far from over, and there's more to uncover in the layers of this remarkable society. And so, as we navigate the bustling marketplace of Aztec history, let's take a detour down the social alleyways of Tenochtitlan, where the human hierarchy was as rigid as a stone staircase, and moving up was about as likely as a llama winning a foot race. In the grand tapestry of Aztec society, every thread had its place, and heaven help you if you tried to weave your own pattern. First, let's talk priests, the spiritual heavyweights whose influence was as towering as the Templo Mare itself. These guys weren't just the spiritual guides of the empire. They were the keepers of celestial balance, with the power to make or break careers, and occasionally necks. Being a priest wasn't just about chanting hymns and lighting candles. No, these guys were the rock stars of ancient Tenochtitlan, holding sway over everything from agricultural success to the emperor's divine right to rule. They were the empire's moral compass, albeit one that pointed in the direction of ritual sacrifice more often than not. Priests were the ultimate arbiters of divine favor, wielding influence that extended far beyond the temple walls. They could interpret omens, a skill as respected as it was feared, because when the stars weren't aligning, someone's head was usually on the line. And about those sacrifices, yes, the stories are true. The Aztecs believed their very survival hinged on these ritual offerings, a belief that made the priests the gatekeepers of cosmic order. Talk about job pressure. It's like having to perform open-heart surgery in front of an audience every day. At the other end of the spectrum, we find the Tlacuilos, the artisans and scribes whose work was the Aztec Empire's answer to Instagram. These creative minds crafted the intricate murals and codices that captured the essence of Aztec life, one vibrant pigment at a time. In a world without selfies or social media, these works of art were the ultimate status symbols, chronicling everything from divine myths to the daily grind. Artisans were the chroniclers of the empire, capturing its glory in stone and paint. Their work was more than just decoration. It was a visual narrative, a way to communicate power and prestige in a society where literacy was a privilege. And let's not forget the Calpuli, the community groups that functioned like mini-societies within the larger empire. Each had its own leaders, schools, and religious centers, maintaining a balance within the sprawling cityscape. They were the social glue that held the empire together, making sure that everyone, from the lowliest farmer to the loftiest noble, knew their place and duty. But let's address the sticky cactus of social mobility, or lack thereof. The Aztec social ladder was more like a stone wall, and climbing it required a combination of birthright, merit, and a healthy dose of divine favor. In theory, merit could propel a commoner up the ranks, but in practice, the path was littered with more obstacles than a Mesoamerican ball game. For many, the best hope of advancement lay in the military, where bravery on the battlefield could earn you land, titles, and a change in social status. Success in war could transform a humble mace huali into a revered eagle warrior, but this was a game of high stakes with few winners. Now, back to the intriguing world of the Pochdecker, the merchant class who were both revered and mistrusted for their wealth and influence. These traders were the rare few who could transcend social boundaries, thanks to their economic prowess and the information they gathered on their travels. They were a vital cog in the empire's machine, and their success was a testament to the Aztec appreciation for trade and commerce. Yet, despite their wealth and influence, even the Pochdecker had to tread carefully, for their prosperity could easily breed envy and suspicion among the nobility. Speaking of nobles, the Pipiltin were the blue-bloods of Aztec society, enjoying privileges that made them the ancient equivalent of today's 1%. They were the landowners, the rulers of Calpulis, and the advisors to the emperor. Their lives were a blend of luxury and duty, with their primary responsibility being the administration of the empire. Nobles were expected to lead by example, upholding the values of the society while ensuring the smooth operation of the state machinery. This brings us to the Tlatlacotin, or slaves, who lived on the lowest rung of the societal ladder. Unlike the chattel slavery of later European empires, Aztec slavery was a more fluid institution. Slaves could own property, marry, and even buy their freedom, a concept that baffled European conquerors when they encountered it. Of course, the road to freedom was arduous, and many remained trapped by debts or bad fortune. But in a society that prized order and hierarchy, even slaves had a role to play, contributing to the empire's economic and social fabric. In the grand scheme of things, the Aztec social structure was a complex web of obligations and expectations. Each class, from the humble farmers to the exalted nobles, played a part in maintaining the balance that kept the empire thriving. It was a society that valued stability and continuity, governed by a set of rules that, while rigid, offered a semblance of order in an unpredictable world. So, as we peel back the layers of this intricate social fabric, it becomes clear that the Aztecs were far from the simplistic portrayals often found in history books. Their society was a sophisticated blend of tradition and innovation, a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. And while the human heart might have been a literal offering to the gods, it was the heart of the people that truly sustained the empire. As we continue our journey through the Aztec world, remember that the past is not just a collection of dates and events. It's a living tapestry of human experience, rich with lessons and insights. The Aztecs, with their vibrant culture and complex society, offer us a window into a world that was as multifaceted as it was fascinating. So stay tuned for more tales from Tenochtitlan, where every stone tells a story, and every story challenges the myths we thought we knew. As we continue our journey through the Aztec world, where every stone tells a story, and every story challenges the myths we thought we knew, let's lace up our sandals and march straight into the blood-soaked heart of the empire. The Aztec military. Forget any notions of warriors as mere muscle-bound extras from a B-rated action flick. In the Aztec Empire, being a warrior was akin to being a celebrity chef, except your ingredients were less farm-to-table and more enemy-to-temple. First, let's bust a persistent myth right off the bat. The Aztecs were not just a gaggle of bloodthirsty conquerors swinging obsidian clubs like they were in an ancient version of whack-a-mole. Their military prowess was a finely tuned instrument of statecraft, essential for expanding the empire's reach and keeping the tribute flowing like a chocolate river at a Wonka factory. The Aztecs were strategic geniuses, using a combination of diplomacy and intimidation, with a dash of ritual warfare to bring neighboring city-states under their thumb. So why were these warriors so feared? Enter the Eagle and Jaguar warriors, the Aztec equivalent of elite special forces with a fashion sense that would leave even the most extravagant fashion weak in awe. These guys were the rock stars of the battlefield, decked out in elaborate costumes featuring feathers and jaguar skins. Because why not dress like your spirit animal when you're about to face off against the enemy? Their attire wasn't just for show. It was a psychological weapon, designed to strike fear into the hearts of opponents who might as well have been staring down a literal force of nature. Becoming an eagle or jaguar warrior wasn't just about looking fierce. It was about earning your stripes, literally. To ascend to these prestigious ranks, a warrior had to capture enemies alive during battle, a feat that required equal parts bravery and cunning. It was less about brute strength and more about tactical genius, making every warrior a potential strategical mastermind. And what did you win for such valor? Land, titles, and a spot in Aztec history as a living legend. Or, a really fancy headdress, which is basically the same thing. But don't let the glamorous image fool you. This was a career path with a high turnover rate, and not because of promotions. The life expectancy of an Aztec warrior was about as reliable as a weathervane in a hurricane. You could be a hero one day and a sacrifice the next, proving that in Tenochtitlan the line between glory and gory was razor-thin. The Aztecs treated warfare like a high-stakes game of chess, but with real blood and guts, an enterprise where every move could be your last. Now, let's talk numbers, because what's a military campaign without some statistics to drive the point home? The Aztec military was a formidable force, boasting tens of thousands of warriors organized into units of 8,000, each led by a tlatani, or chief. Battles were meticulously planned, with scouts gathering intelligence and priests reading omens to decide the most auspicious time to attack. The Aztecs were masterful at logistics, mobilizing troops with an efficiency that would make even modern military strategists envious. And why all the fuss over military conquests? Well, beyond the obvious thrill of victory, these campaigns were crucial for sustaining the empire's economy. Conquered territories were required to pay tribute in goods, from foodstuffs to precious stones, which kept the markets of Tenochtitlan humming like a well-tuned lute. It was a win-win for the victors, though perhaps less so for the vanquished, who faced the grim choice of submitting or facing the business end of an obsidian blade. But here's where the Aztecs would have slayed it on any reality TV show about survival. The Flower Wars. These were ceremonial battles fought not for land or plunder, but for captives to be used in religious sacrifices. Picture it. Two city-states agree to meet on the battlefield, not to annihilate each other, but to engage in a macabre dance where the ultimate prize was the honor of being sacrificed to the gods. It was the ultimate test of skill and bravery, a ritualized contest that kept warriors on their toes and the gods appeased. While the concept of ritual sacrifice might seem barbaric to modern sensibilities, it was deeply embedded in the Aztec worldview, a belief system where the cosmos was constantly on the brink of chaos. Sacrifice was seen as a noble duty, a way to ensure the sun's rising and the earth's fertility. For the Aztecs, being chosen as a sacrificial victim was an honor, a direct ticket to the afterlife, although it probably didn't make the process any less terrifying. So, why did the Aztecs place such a premium on military prowess? In a world where power was measured by the number of tributary states under your control, having a formidable army was the ultimate insurance policy. It was the Aztecs' way of saying, "We're here, we're fierce, and we have the receipts to prove it." The military was the backbone of the empire, underpinning its social structure and enabling its economic prosperity. Without it, all the cocoa beans in the world wouldn't have been enough to keep the empire afloat. But let's not romanticize it. Being an Aztec warrior was a brutal, unforgiving existence, fraught with danger and hardship. It was a life lived on the edge, where glory was fleeting and death was a constant companion. Yet, for those who survived and thrived, it was a path to power and prestige, a way to transcend the rigid confines of Aztec society and carve out a legacy that would be remembered for generations. In the grand tapestry of Aztec life, warriors were both the weavers and the threads, shaping the empire's destiny with each battle fought and each victory won. They were the living embodiment of the Aztec spirit, fierce, unyielding, and relentless in their pursuit of greatness. As we unspool the stories of these legendary fighters, it becomes clear that their legacy is as enduring as the empire they helped to build, a testament to the power of human ambition and the indomitable will to survive, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And so, as we leave the battlefield behind and prepare to delve deeper into the heart of Aztec society, remember that history is not just a collection of facts and figures. It's a living narrative, rich with drama and intrigue, where each chapter offers new insights and challenges old assumptions. The Aztecs, with their vibrant culture and complex social structure, were a civilization that defied easy categorization, proving that the past is as layered and multifaceted as the people who lived it. Stay tuned, because the story of the Aztec Empire is far from over, and there's more to uncover in the layers of this remarkable society. Now, if the Aztecs' military might was the engine of their empire, then their social structure was the intricate wiring that kept everything running, until, of course, it started short-circuiting. The Aztecs had built a civilization that was as robust as it was complex, yet, like a Jenga tower teetering on the brink, it was vulnerable to the slightest nudge. Enter the Spanish conquistadors, who brought not just smallpox and steel, but a knack for exploiting societal fissures that were already beginning to fracture. Let's set the stage. It's 1519, and Hernan Cortés is making his grand entrance into the Mexican Valley, armed with horses, guns, and a formidable sense of entitlement. The Spanish were outnumbered, sure, but they had a secret weapon, diplomacy that would make Machiavelli blush. Cortés didn't just march in swinging swords. He cleverly aligned himself with disgruntled tributary states eager to throw off the Aztec yoke, or in this case, cocoa bean burden. The Aztec Empire, for all its might, was a loose confederation of city-states held together by tribute and fear, and Cortés played these tensions like a virtuose. The Aztecs were no strangers to internal conflict. Their stratified society was a powder keg of pent-up frustrations, with lower-class commoners and oppressed tributary states itching for change. The empire's reliance on a constant influx of tribute to sustain its economy was both its strength and its Achilles heel. The tributary system, while excellent for filling Tenochtitlan's coffers, left many regions simmering with resentment. It was as if the empire had built its foundation on tectonic plates, and Cortés was the earthquake that set everything in motion. But let's not place all the blame on the Spaniards. The Aztec leadership, under the rule of Moctezuma II, didn't exactly help their cause. Imagine being the emperor of a sprawling empire and deciding the best course of action is to invite the conquistadors into your capital like their long-lost cousins. Moctezuma's indecisiveness bordered on tragicomedy, and his attempts to appease the Spanish only served to embolden them. It was a classic case of trying to keep the peace while your house is on fire, an approach that, unsurprisingly, ended in disaster. Yet, even as the walls of Tenochtitlan began to crumble, the Aztecs didn't go down without a fight. The siege of Tenochtitlan was a brutal affair, lasting from May 22 to August 13, 1521, and it was anything but a walk in the park for the conquistadors. The Aztecs fought with a ferocity born of desperation, turning every street into a battleground and every building into a fortress. It was a grueling, bloody stalemate that only broke when disease, starvation, and overwhelming Spanish reinforcements tipped the scales. So, what led to the Aztec downfall? It wasn't just the Spanish weapons or their unholy alliances with local tribes. It was a perfect storm of external pressures and internal weaknesses. The Aztecs had built an empire on the backs of a social structure that, while intricate and efficient, was inherently unstable. The rigidity of their caste system, the heavy demands of tribute, and the expectation of constant expansion created a society that couldn't adapt quickly enough to the changing tides. Now, let's fast forward to the legacy of the Aztecs, which is as fascinating as it is misunderstood. Their society has been romanticized and demonized in equal measure, often more fiction than fact. We picture them as either noble savages or ruthless barbarians, but the truth, as always, is more nuanced. The Aztecs were brilliant engineers, with Tenochtitlan boasting aqueducts and causeways that rivaled anything in Europe. They were shrewd economists, turning cocoa beans into a currency that kept their markets bustling. And they were artists, leaving behind a legacy of vibrant murals and intricate codices. But genius is a double-edged sword. The same ingenuity that allowed the Aztecs to thrive also made them vulnerable to their own success. Their society was a high-stakes game of survival of the fittest, where the weak were sacrificed, sometimes literally, to keep the empire running. They were architects of their own downfall, caught in a cycle of conquest and tribute that couldn't be sustained indefinitely. Today, the Aztec legacy lives on in ways both visible and invisible. The ruins of Tenochtitlan sit beneath modern Mexico City, a reminder of a civilization that was once at the pinnacle of its power. Their influence can be seen in everything from Mexican cuisine to cultural practices, proving that while empires may fall, their impact can endure for centuries. As we wrap up this whirlwind journey through Aztec history, let's remember that the past is not a simple tale of good versus evil or success versus failure. It's a complex tapestry woven from the threads of human ambition, ingenuity, and folly. The Aztecs were a civilization that defied easy categorization, embodying both the heights of human achievement and the depths of human hubris. They remind us that history is not just a list of dates and battles, but a living narrative that continues to shape our world even today. As the dust settles over the fall of Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs leave us with a compelling question. How much of history is shaped by genius, and how much by the unforgiving hand of fate? Perhaps in the end, it's not about the survival of the fittest, but the survival of the most adaptable. Because while the Aztecs may have fallen, their legacy endures, vibrant, complex, and as intriguing as ever. And that's a lesson worth remembering. Whether you're an empire on the brink, or just a curious mind looking to understand the world a little better. In the bustling world of 4th century BCE Greece, Zeno of Citium sailed into history, quite literally, on the crest of a shipwreck. Now there's an entrance for you. Picture Zeno, a well-to-do merchant from Cyprus, probably feeling rather chipper about his cargo of purple dye, a luxury item that made the ancient world go round in style. But Poseidon had other plans, and Zeno's ship, along with his fortune, took a nosedive into the Mediterranean. Talk about a bad day at sea. So there he was, washed ashore in Athens around 300 BCE, wallet empty, but head full of questions. And what better place to ponder life's grand mysteries than Athens, the intellectual mecca of the ancient world? If you're going to be shipwrecked and broke, Athens is the place to be. It's like ending up in Silicon Valley after your startup crashes. Irony of life, meet Zeno. Zeno didn't waste time wallowing in his salty misfortune. Instead, he wandered into a bookstore, because why not? It's here that he stumbled upon Xenophon's Memorabilia, a book that waxed philosophical about Socrates. Intrigued, Zeno asked the bookseller where men like Socrates could be found. The bookseller pointed to a passing philosopher, none other than Crates of Thebes. This is the part where you'd cue the meet-cute music if ancient philosophy had a soundtrack. Crates was a cynic philosopher, the kind of guy who thought societal norms were for suckers and believed in living a life of virtue in accordance with nature. Picture a bohemian hipster who sleeps in a barrel, scoffs at luxury, and has a beard you could lose a cat in. For Zeno, meeting Crates was like finding the mentor he never knew he needed. Crates took Zeno under his wing, not with gentle platitudes, but with the kind of tough love that involved public shaming and occasionally tossing Zeno's hardened coins into the sea. After all, who needs cash when you can have character-building experiences, right? Zeno's transformation from merchant to philosopher wasn't an overnight thing. It was a steady erosion of his material desires, perhaps accelerated by Crates' relentless, "Why do you need it?" attitude. Crates was known for his radical acts, like living with his wife, Hipparchia, in public defiance of the norms. The Cynics were the original counterculture movement, minus the tie-dye. They believed in living simply and naturally, and Zeno found this philosophy both challenging and liberating. It resonated with him, perhaps because he'd already lost everything he valued materially. What's another philosophical leap when you've already jumped ship metaphorically and physically? Zeno studied under Crates for years, absorbing the cynic way of life while simultaneously crafting his own philosophical outlook. He was like a sponge, soaking up the ideas floating around the Athenian agora, a place that was part marketplace, part university, and all chaos. Zeno wasn't just learning, he was evolving. He took the cynic ideal of virtue and mixed it with a heaping spoonful of Socratic logic and a dash of Heraclitean fire. What he concocted was a philosophy that would stand the test of time, Stoicism. By the time Zeno was ready to step out from under Crates' shadow, he had developed a philosophy based on self-control, rationality, and inner peace. He believed in focusing on what one can control and accepting what one cannot. A philosophy born out of a shipwreck. You bet. Stoicism was about weathering life's storms with dignity and grace, a mindset Zeno had practically trademarked. In a move that would make every PR agent proud, Zeno decided to hold his classes at the Stoa Poikile, or Painted Porch, in Athens. This wasn't just a place with a catchy name. The Stoa Poikile was a bustling hub of Athenian life. decorated with vibrant frescoes depicting historical battles and mythical scenes. It was the perfect backdrop for a philosopher who was ready to make waves. There, under the painted eaves, Zeno taught his philosophy to anyone willing to listen: merchants, politicians, and even the occasional curious tourist. It was here that Stoicism began to take root, not just as a personal guide, but as a foundation for how one could live in harmony with the world. Zeno's choice of location was strategic genius. The Stoa Poikile was central, public, and accessible. It wasn't just a school, it was a stage. Zeno's lectures were open-air affairs, free to all. No ivory tower here, just a porch where ideas were as vibrant as the murals that adorned its walls. The painted porch wasn't just a venue. It was a symbol of Stoicism's accessibility and its appeal to the common man. Zeno had gone from a merchant adrift to a philosopher firmly anchored in his own school of thought. Stoicism was born, not in the ivory confines of academia, but in the lively agora of Athens, from the wreckage of a life at sea to the flourishing of a philosophy on land. And thus, Zeno of Citium, through the whims of fate and the guidance of a cynic, established a legacy that, like the enduring city of Athens, has weathered the winds of time. Let's dive deeper into Zeno's philosophy, a system of thought that was as much about living as it was about thinking. Stoicism, as Zeno envisioned it, was all about living in harmony with nature. And no, that didn't mean hugging trees or living off acorns. For Zeno, nature signified the universe's rational order, and humans, with our penchant for drama and chaos, were meant to align ourselves with it. He championed the idea of the dichotomy of control, a concept as timeless as it is simple, but often overlooked in our pursuit of control over everything from the weather to the Wi-Fi signal. According to Zeno, the secret source to a happy life was focusing on what you could control and releasing the reins on what you couldn't. Try telling that to someone stuck in traffic on a Monday morning. Now, let's imagine Zeno's teachings on a modern platform like Twitter. His philosophy could be distilled into 280-character nuggets of wisdom. Control the controllable, ignore the rest. Lifehack might have been a trending hashtag, but would it have really helped people in a world addicted to the illusion of control? Probably not. After all, we live in an age where people lose it if their latte isn't the perfect temperature. Zeno's advice would likely be met with a flurry of eye-roll emojis and a barrage of sarcastic memes. At the core of Stoicism was Zeno's belief that virtue was the only true good. Wealth, health, and even life itself were indifferent, neither inherently good nor bad, since they could vanish as quickly as Zeno's ship did beneath the waves. Virtue, on the other hand, was steadfast and unwavering, a beacon in the stormy seas of human existence. This idea might seem quaint in a world that's all about the next big thing, but in Zeno's time, it was revolutionary. The idea that happiness didn't depend on external circumstances, but on internal character was as groundbreaking as, say, the invention of the smartphone. Zeno's views on virtue weren't just abstract ideals. He believed that virtue was a form of practical wisdom, a guide to making decisions and living a life of integrity. His emphasis on logic and ethics wasn't just academic. It was meant to be lived. Picture Zeno in the agora, surrounded by eager students and perhaps a few bemused onlookers. He was known for his charisma and his ability to challenge assumptions with a deft turn of phrase. His students didn't just learn from lectures, they experienced philosophy in action. Zeno's teachings were the original life coaching sessions, minus the exorbitant fees. One of the funniest anecdotes about Zeno involves his interaction with a student who was prattling on about some trivial grievance. Zeno, in his usual no-nonsense style, asked, "Why are you complaining about a situation you cannot control? Would you complain about the rain, or would you simply seek shelter?" It's the kind of wisdom that sounds great on paper, but is harder to practice when, say, your toga gets caught in a chariot wheel. The Stoic emphasis on logic wasn't just about solving abstract puzzles. It was about understanding human behavior and emotions. Zeno taught his followers to analyze their emotions logically, asking themselves why they felt a certain way, and whether their feelings aligned with rational thought. It sounds like a therapy session, but in ancient Greece, it was revolutionary. Imagine trying to apply that logic to today's world, where emotions often run wild, fueled by everything from political debates to reality TV drama. Zeno's method was about stepping back, taking a breath, and applying reason, a skill that would certainly be welcome in today's comment sections. Zeno's teachings weren't just about personal development. They had practical applications in governance and society. He believed that living virtuously meant contributing to the common good and acting with justice and fairness. His ideas laid the groundwork for later Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, who applied these principles to leadership. In Zeno's view, the ideal society was one where individuals acted in accordance with nature and reason, creating harmony and balance. It's a vision that's both appealing and elusive, a dream of a world where politics is about principles rather than power plays. As charismatic as Zeno was, he wasn't without his critics. Some contemporaries found his ideas too idealistic, questioning whether such a philosophy was practical in the cutthroat world of Greek city-states. But Zeno wasn't preaching utopia. He was offering a way to navigate life's unpredictability with resilience and grace. His philosophy was less about changing the world and more about changing oneself, a message that resonates even today. Zeno's stoic calm in the face of adversity was legendary. There's a story of how, when he was once criticized for his shabby appearance, he simply replied, "Better to be a poor philosopher than a rich ignoramus." It's the kind of comeback that would shut down even the most persistent internet troll. Zeno's life was a testament to his teachings, a journey from shipwrecked merchant to a philosopher whose ideas have endured for over 2 millennia. In our fast-paced, material-driven world, Zeno's philosophy might seem like a relic from a simpler time, but its core tenets, focusing on what we can control, living virtuously, and using logic to guide our actions, are as relevant as ever. Whether you're navigating the complexities of modern life or simply trying to make it through the day with a bit more grace, Zeno's wisdom offers a timeless guide. But remember, while Zeno's ideas are easy to admire, they're much harder to live by. As we continue to explore his legacy, let's see how his Stoic philosophy evolved and influenced generations of thinkers, remaining a steadfast beacon in the ever-changing tides of history. As we delve deeper into Zeno's world, the Athens of his time was a city in perpetual intellectual overdrive, buzzing with ideas like a philosophical beehive. It's here, amidst the chaos of debates and the clatter of sandals on cobblestones, that Zeno's Stoicism found its footing. Athens wasn't just the birthplace of democracy. It was a hotbed of intellectual rivalries that made today's ideological battles look like a friendly game of chess. With philosophical heavyweights duking it out in the agora, Zeno's Stoicism had to compete against the likes of Epicureanism and skepticism, each vying for the hearts and minds of Athenians with the fervor of modern political campaigns. Now, let's take a closer look at these philosophical sparring partners. Epicureanism, founded by Epicurus, was the philosophical equivalent of an all-inclusive resort. Epicurus preached that the ultimate goal of life was to attain pleasure and avoid pain. But before you envision toga-clad revelers indulging in non-stop hedonistic escapades, let's clarify. Epicurus advocated for a more refined form of pleasure. Think tranquility over debauchery, mental contentment over sensory overload. To him, the sweet spot of happiness lay in simple pleasures, like friendship and a good loaf of bread. In today's terms, he was the original mindfulness guru, urging followers to savor the moment without getting sucked into the drama. In contrast, skepticism, championed by Pyrrho of Elais, took a radically different approach. The skeptics were like the original contrarians, questioning everything with the relentless persistence of a toddler asking, "Why?" They doubted that humans could ever really know anything for certain, arguing that suspending judgment was the only path to tranquility. In a world filled with conflict and uncertainty, skepticism offered a refuge of doubt, a philosophy for those who preferred to sit on the fence rather than jump to conclusions. For the skeptics, Ignorance truly was bliss. Enter Zeno, with his Stoic philosophy, striding confidently into this intellectual ring. While the Epicureans sought pleasure and the skeptics embraced doubt, Zeno offered a third way, a life of virtue guided by reason. Stoicism proposed that true happiness came not from external circumstances, but from the internal mastery of one's mind. In a city that had seen its fair share of political upheaval and turmoil, Zeno's teachings were like a calm harbor amidst the storm. His focus on personal responsibility and emotional resilience resonated with Athenians who were navigating their own choppy waters. And speaking of choppy political waters, let's not forget Antigonus II Gonatas, king of Macedon, who was a key player in the Athenian scene. Antigonus wasn't just a king, he was a philosopher king, a rare breed who valued intellect as much as power. His friendship with Zeno was no mere footnote. It was a testament to Zeno's influence beyond the philosophical circles. Antigonus, who ruled from 277 to 239 BCE, was known for his patronage of philosophers, and his court was like the TED talk stage of the ancient world. Zeno's connection with such a significant figure highlighted the practical appeal of Stoicism as a philosophy that could guide not just individual lives, but also the governance of states. In the Athenian agora, the competition between these philosophical schools was fierce, like a reality TV show where the prize was the ultimate truth. Each school had its own take on human existence, and their debates could be as cutthroat as they were enlightening. You can almost hear the philosophical banter echoing through the ages. Epicureans urging people to chill out and enjoy life's simple pleasures, skeptics raising an eyebrow at every claim of certainty, and Stoics advocating for a life of virtue and resilience. As Zeno's teachings gained traction, Stoicism attracted followers from all walks of life, from merchants to statesmen. It wasn't just a philosophy for scholars. It was a guide for anyone seeking to live well in an unpredictable world. Zeno's influence extended into public life, offering a blueprint for ethical leadership and civic responsibility. His emphasis on rational thought and emotional regulation found an eager audience among those weary of the political machinations and social tumult of the time. The appeal of Stoicism lay in its practicality, a philosophy that could be lived rather than just contemplated. It was like the Swiss army knife of ancient philosophies, offering tools for everything from handling personal setbacks to navigating public affairs. And while other schools of thought might promise a utopian vision or a roadmap to bliss, Stoicism was grounded in the gritty reality of life's challenges. It was about finding peace not by escaping the world, but by engaging with it fully and rationally. In the grand tapestry of Athenian intellectual life, Zeno's Stoicism wove a thread of resilience and reason, offering a counterpoint to the pleasure-seeking Epicureans and the doubt-embracing skeptics. His teachings were not just an abstract exercise, but a practical guide to living well, a philosophy that resonated with the citizens of Athens and beyond. Zeno's legacy, like the city itself, was marked by a blend of idealism and pragmatism, a reflection of the timeless quest for wisdom in a world that never stops changing. As we continue our exploration of Zeno's impact, we'll see how his Stoic philosophy evolved and influenced generations of thinkers, remaining a steadfast beacon in the ever-changing tides of history. Stay tuned as we navigate the complexities of Stoicism's legacy, from ancient Greece to the modern world, uncovering the enduring relevance of Zeno's wisdom in our quest for a life well lived. In exploring Zeno's legacy, Stoicism might seem like the ancient equivalent of a minimalist Instagram feed, clean, composed, and somehow effortlessly profound. But let's not kid ourselves. The reality was more like an ancient version of a Marie Kondo experiment gone awry. Stoicism, while romanticized as a cool, calm, and collected philosophy, often gets misunderstood as a call to purge every ounce of emotional baggage and material desire from your life. Spoiler alert, Zeno wasn't recommending you ditch all your earthly possessions in a dramatic bonfire of detachment. So let's sift through the myths with a critical eye and a smirk. To begin, let's address the enduring myth of Zeno as the ascetic monk of antiquity, a man who must have worn his discipline like a badge of honor. Sure, he advocated for self-control, but some stories about his lifestyle choices make him sound like he existed solely on a diet of air and philosophical musings. According to Diogenes Laertius, Zeno lived on a frugal diet, often comprising figs, bread, and honey. Not exactly the stuff of luxurious feasts, but he wasn't exactly nibbling on pebbles either. His choice wasn't about suffering for suffering's sake. It was about practicality, a lesson in living within one's means. Zeno's meals were more about sustenance than sacrifice, a reminder that sometimes less is indeed more, especially when your shipwreck has left you with more philosophical currency than actual cash. And speaking of austerity, Zeno's wardrobe choices were the stuff of ancient Greek legend, or at least a good meme. He was frequently described as wearing a simple cloak, the himation, a garment that had all the flair of your dad's favorite bathrobe. But let's debunk the notion that Zeno was some kind of fashion martyr. His clothing choices were more about functionality than a sartorial statement. In a world where the drapery of your toga could speak volumes about your social status, Zeno's modest garb was a declaration of independence from the tyranny of trends. He wasn't preaching poverty. He was living a philosophy that valued substance over style. Zeno's cloak might have been plain, but it was woven with the threads of intention and purpose. Now, let's dive into a classic myth about Zeno's legendary self-discipline. There's a popular anecdote that Zeno once broke a toe, but refused to cry out in pain. Instead, he calmly remarked, "I am being reminded that I am mortal." While that might sound like the ancient equivalent of a viral TikTok challenge, #Stoic Pain Challenge, anyone, it's a testament to how Stoicism, and Zeno by extension, has often been idealized to the point of absurdity. The reality is, Zeno wasn't advocating for a life devoid of emotion. He was emphasizing the importance of mastering one's reactions. It's the ancient Greek version of keep calm and carry on, not grit your teeth and pretend you're a statue. Zeno's reputation for stoic endurance didn't just spring from nowhere. Athens of his time was a pressure cooker of political ambition, philosophical rivalry, and social upheaval. It was a city where emotional resilience wasn't just a philosophical preference, it was a survival skill. Zeno's teachings were less about turning people into emotionless automatons and more about equipping them to handle the roller coaster of life with a bit more grace. It's like the difference between riding a bull and riding an office chair. Both require balance, but one's a lot more unpredictable. And while we're myth-busting, let's tackle the idea that Stoicism was the ancient equivalent of a self-help book, promising a one-way ticket to eternal bliss. Stoicism, with its emphasis on virtue as the only true good, might sound like the original life hack. But Zeno wasn't handing out easy solutions. His philosophy demanded rigorous self-examination and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. It wasn't about achieving happiness through shortcuts. It was about building a solid foundation of character that could withstand the tempests of fate. It's the kind of wisdom that sounds great in theory, but is as hard to practice as convincing yourself that kale chips are a real snack. Zeno's focus on the dichotomy of control, the idea of distinguishing between what we can and cannot control, wasn't just a philosophical brain teaser. It was a practical guide for navigating a world that seemed hell-bent on chaos. In a society where fortunes could change as quickly as the Athenian weather, understanding this dichotomy was like having a compass in a storm. Zeno was advocating for a kind of mental resilience that was revolutionary in its simplicity. It was like telling people to stop trying to control the wind and start learning how to sail. A timeless lesson, especially if your ship has already hit the rocks. Now, let's not forget the human side of Zeno, that beneath the philosophical facade was a man who, like the rest of us, was subject to the whims of fate. Diogenes Laertius recounts how, in his later years, Zeno suffered from a severe leg injury. Instead of railing against his misfortune, he accepted it with the kind of stoic resignation that has been both admired and misunderstood. His story underscores a fundamental tenet of Stoicism, that life's hardships aren't to be avoided, but embraced as opportunities for growth. In today's world of instant gratification and quick fixes, it's a lesson that remains stubbornly relevant. Zeno's approach to life, stripped of its mythical embellishments, was about finding a balance between acceptance and action, a philosophy that resonated with Athenians navigating the precarious landscape of their city-state. His teachings were a reminder that while we can't control the waves, we can learn to navigate them with skill and wisdom. And maybe, just maybe, we can do so with a wry smile and a cloak that's more practical than pompous. As we continue our journey through Zeno's legacy, we'll uncover more about how his Stoic philosophy, grounded in the realities of human existence, has influenced generations of thinkers and leaders. From the bustling marketplaces of ancient Athens to the modern boardrooms and beyond, Stoicism remains a beacon for those seeking to live a life guided by reason and resilience. So hang on to your himation, because the next part of our exploration promises even more insights into the enduring power of Zeno's wisdom. Stay tuned, because this philosophical odyssey is far from over. As we sail beyond the horizon of Zeno's life, let's chart the course of Stoicism as it made waves across the Roman Empire. Picture it. A philosophy born from a shipwreck in ancient Greece finds itself steering the hearts and minds of Roman emperors and statesmen. Talk about an upgrade from zero to hero, or should we say, from Zeno to Nero. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Nero was more about fiddles than philosophy. Fast forward to Rome, circa 1st century BCE, a bustling metropolis that makes ancient Athens look like a quaint village. Enter Stoicism, stage left, as a beacon of rational thought in a world where power and politics often overshadowed personal virtue. The allure of Stoicism was like a breath of fresh air in a city where the air was thick with ambition and intrigue. The Romans, known for their practicality, found in Stoicism a philosophy that spoke to the heart of their empire: discipline, duty, and dignity. Now, let's talk about one of the most prominent Roman Stoics, Seneca the Younger. Born in 4 BCE, Seneca was the philosopher equivalent of a rock star, but with more scrolls and fewer groupies. He served as an advisor to Emperor Nero, which was a bit like being the designated driver at a frat party, necessary but not exactly fun. Seneca's writings, including Letters from a Stoic, were packed with practical wisdom, like a philosophical Swiss army knife for navigating the treacherous terrain of Roman politics. His counsel often echoed Zeno's teachings: focus on what you can control and let go of what you can't. Imagine telling that to Nero as he plotted his next theatrical escapade. Seneca's life was a roller coaster of Stoic ideals versus the harsh reality of imperial Rome. Despite his attempts to guide Nero with Stoic wisdom, he found himself embroiled in the political machinations of the time, ultimately forced to commit suicide in 65 CE. His death was a tragic footnote in the annals of Stoicism, a reminder that even the most steadfast philosopher could be swept away by the tides of power. Next, we turn to Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled from 161 to 180 CE. If you ever wondered what would happen if you combined the leadership of a Roman emperor with the introspection of a philosopher, Marcus was your answer. His Meditations, written during military campaigns, are a testament to the practical application of Stoic principles. Imagine penning profound philosophical reflections while dealing with barbarian invasions. Talk about multitasking. Marcus Aurelius embodied the Stoic ideal of living in accordance with nature and reason, even amidst the chaos of imperial rule. His reign was marked by efforts to govern justly and wisely, a Stoic balancing act between the demands of power and the pursuit of virtue. Unlike Seneca, Marcus had the authority to implement Stoic principles on a grand scale, striving for a harmonious society rooted in justice and rationality. The influence of Stoicism didn't fade with the fall of Rome. It rippled through history, shaping thought in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and eventually influencing modern philosophy. The Enlightenment thinkers found kinship in Stoic ideals, particularly the emphasis on reason and self-discipline. Stoicism's appeal lay in its pragmatic approach to human existence, offering a framework for navigating life's challenges with equanimity. In today's world, Stoicism resonates with those seeking stability amidst the frenetic pace of modern life. The Stoic focus on controlling one's reactions in a world that often feels uncontrollable is a message that rings truer than ever. Imagine Zeno scrolling through social media. His philosophy would be the antidote to the anxiety of likes and retweets. Control the controllable could easily be a trending hashtag, a reminder to focus on what matters and let go of the rest. But let's get real. Practicing Stoicism in the 21st century is no walk in the park. It's more like a tightrope walk, balancing the constant barrage of information and instant gratification. Stoicism's call to focus on virtue over material success might sound quaint in an age obsessed with the latest gadgets and status symbols. Yet, the core tenets remain a beacon for those seeking a life of meaning beyond the noise. As we wrap up our journey through Zeno's legacy, let's imagine how he might tackle today's existential crises. In a world where the pursuit of happiness often feels like a hamster wheel, Zeno would likely advocate for finding contentment in simplicity and clarity. Picture him navigating the complexities of modern life with the same calm resolve he displayed in ancient Athens. Whether facing a crashing stock market or a crashing Wi-Fi signal, Zeno's teachings remind us to focus on what truly matters: our character, our actions, and the connections we forge along the way. In the end, Zeno of Citium's Stoicism is more than just an ancient philosophy. It's a timeless guide for living well in an unpredictable world. From the bustling agoras of Athens to the marble halls of Rome, and now to the digital age, Stoicism's legacy endures, challenging us to cultivate resilience, wisdom, and inner peace. As we navigate the seas of modern life, perhaps we can all take a page from Zeno's book and find our own painted porch, a place where we can reflect, learn, and grow amidst the chaos. You're jolted awake by the crisp morning air creeping into your sod house, a little reminder that you're in Vinland, where comfort is more of a suggestion than a reality. It's the year 1000 AD, and you're living the adventurous life of a Viking explorer. But hold the horned helmets. We've got some real talk to get through. As you shake off the morning fog, you're surrounded by the earthy smell of peat and damp wood. Your living quarters are not the glamorous mead halls of popular lore, but rather a humble turf house with walls of tightly packed sod. It's cozy if you ignore the draft and the occasional rodent visitor. You're far from home, and the new world isn't exactly rolling out the red carpet. Breakfast is calling, and no, it's not a boisterous feast of meat and mead. Instead, you're probably munching on barley porridge, maybe sweetened with a touch of honey if you're lucky. The Vikings were many things, but wasteful wasn't one of them. Every morsel counts in this land of limited resources, and what you eat is as much about survival as it is sustenance. You lift your eyes from your bowl to the sight of the Nar, the stout and sturdy ship that ferried you across the Atlantic. Unlike the sleek, dragon-headed longships you've seen in movies, the Nar is the workhorse of the Viking fleet, built for cargo, not speed. It's a floating lifeline, about 54 feet long and 15 feet wide, designed to handle the open ocean's tantrums while carrying up to 24 tons of goods. Without it, your adventure would have ended before it began. A quick scan of your vessel reveals the results of a transatlantic voyage. Salt crusted on the oak planks, sails stained from seawater and storms. The Nar is a reminder that you didn't just hop on a boat for a joyride. You crossed over 2,000 miles of often hostile sea. The journey from Greenland to Vinland is no mere weekend getaway. It's a grueling testament to endurance and a willingness to face the unknown when most wouldn't even dare. Now let's talk economics. Outfitting one of these bad boys isn't as simple as grabbing a few buddies and setting sail. You're looking at costs climbing to the equivalent of a small fortune, even by Viking standards. Timber for the hull, iron for the nails, wool for the sails, all of it adds up. And let's not forget the crew, Who'll want their share of whatever bounty you manage to haul back? This journey is a high-stakes investment, one that could make or break fortunes. As much as you'd like to bask in the romanticized glory of Viking raids, the truth is a bit more mundane and a lot less glamorous. Sure, there were the occasional raids, but this New World gig is about trade, exploration, and establishing new settlements. You're not here to pillage. You're here to survive and maybe, just maybe, find a new life in this land of untapped potential. The harsh reality is that the all-pillaging, all-the-time narrative doesn't hold water. Vikings were traders, settlers, and explorers as much as they were warriors. With breakfast done, you ready yourself for the day's tasks, which include everything from repairing your ship to scouting for food. Each day is a balancing act between maintaining what you've got and trying to secure a little bit more. It's a far cry from the action-packed legends, but in the end, it's the daily grind that makes this whole venture possible. As you step out of your sod house, you can't help but feel the weight of history on your shoulders. It's a new world with endless possibilities and no shortage of challenges. Here, to another day in Vinland. As you step out of your sod house, the brisk air nips at your cheeks, a gentle reminder that Vinland isn't handing out any warm welcomes today. But hey, you didn't cross the North Atlantic expecting a tropical paradise, did you? Your eyes scan the horizon where the sea meets the sky, and it's clear that today the Nar is calling. Time to hit those unfamiliar waters around Newfoundland, where the only thing guaranteed is uncertainty. Setting sail without GPS or Google Maps might sound like a nightmare today, but for Vikings, it was just another Tuesday. You've got a trusty sun compass, or as it's known in Old Norse, a solarstein. It's essentially a wooden disc with a central pin, casting a shadow that helps you determine cardinal directions when the sun's out to play. Sure, it's not the latest smartphone app, but it does the trick when you've got a whole ocean to traverse. When clouds decide to crash the party, you switch to landmarks, coastlines, islands, and that one oddly shaped rock you swear you saw last week. Welcome to 11th century navigation, where the margin for error is about as wide as your Nar. Now, let's talk about the real challenges that make this expedition less a heroic saga and more a masterclass in risk management. First off, the weather. Unpredictable doesn't even begin to cover it. One moment, the sea is as calm as a Sunday morning, and the next, it's tossing you around like a toy boat in a bathtub. With winds that could flip your mood and your ship at the same time, every Viking sailor knows that nature doesn't take requests. So you adapt. You learn to read the skies like an ancient cryptic scroll, constantly on guard for signs of an impending storm. But weather isn't your only concern. These waters are frequented by the indigenous peoples of North America, the ancestors of today's First Nations. The Vikings referred to them as Skraelinga, which roughly translates to little people or barbarians in Old Norse. Let's just say relations were complicated. You're in their territory, and while the romanticized tales might paint Vikings as fearless warriors ready for battle, the reality is much more nuanced. Diplomacy is as vital as your trusty axe. The last thing you need is to start an unplanned skirmish. Trade could be on the cards, or not. It's a delicate dance of curiosity and caution. So were Vikings brave. Sure, but not in the swashbuckling Hollywood sense. The risks they faced were immense, and no amount of bravado would change that. The possibility of shipwreck, hostile encounters, or simply getting hopelessly lost was always looming. This wasn't about glory, it was survival. Each expedition was a gamble, a high-stakes game where the ocean was both your ally and adversary. And let's not forget the economics of this daring venture. You're not just out here for the thrill. There's a business angle too. The New World holds the promise of resources like timber, which is as valuable as gold back home in Greenland. Your Nar has limited cargo space, so every decision counts. Load up on too much of one thing, and you might miss out on something more profitable. It's a balancing act, and let's face it, economics in Viking times was less about spreadsheets and more about gut feeling and negotiation skills. As the Nar cuts through the water, it's clear that this journey is as much about what you leave behind as what you hope to find. The romanticized image of a Viking, all brawn and no brain, doesn't do justice to the complexity of their expeditions. Sure, the sagas love a good battle story, but day-to-day life was about making hard choices and living with them. No small feat when the stakes are this high. So here you are, sailing the edge of the known world with nothing but your wits, some rudimentary tools, and a healthy respect for the unpredictable nature of life. Every wave that rocks your Nar reminds you that this isn't just an adventure. It's a test of endurance, skill, and perhaps a touch of madness. The horizon stretches endlessly before you, a canvas of possibilities and pitfalls alike. Here, to the next leg of the journey, where history waits to be made, one brave decision at a time. As the Nar glides into the small bay, you're greeted by the sight of your fellow Vikings bustling about the nascent settlement. Vinland, they called it, a name that conjures visions of fertile lands and endless bounty. The reality, though, is a bit more rustic. Think less land of milk and honey, and more land of moss and hardened meals. But the potential is there, hidden beneath the surface like a treasure chest waiting to be pried open. You jump off the Nar, boots squelching in the mud, and take in the scene. The settlement is a modest affair, with a few turf houses like your own and a communal hall that's more functional than fashionable. It's not exactly a metropolis, but it's home, for now. You've got a solid crew of about 70 to 90 people, depending on who you ask, and everyone's got a role to play. It's a symphony of survival, orchestrated by necessity and the occasional stroke of luck. Now on to the juicy part, economics. You didn't travel over 2,000 miles just to set up a rustic B&B. There's business to be done, and the new world is like a giant, untapped resource buffet. Top of the menu, lumber. Back in Greenland and Iceland, trees are about as common as unicorns, so timber is worth its weight in gold, or silver, if you're being historically accurate. Those towering pines and sturdy oaks are basically screaming, "Chop me down and make a fortune." But don't get too carried away with the axe just yet. It's not just about what you can take, it's about what you can trade. Enter the indigenous peoples of North America. Forget the Hollywood trope of endless hostility. The reality is way more nuanced. You're not the first Europeans they've seen, and you won't be the last. They've got something you want, like furs, which are highly prized back home. And you've got something they might find intriguing, whether it's metal tools or those fascinating woven goods. Trading is less about language and more about understanding. Gestures, expressions, and a lot of pointing go a long way in bartering. And it's not just about goods, it's about forming relationships, however tenuous they may be. There's a delicate balance between curiosity and caution, much like walking a tightrope with a barrel of mead in each hand. Now, let's bust a myth or two. The romanticized image of Vikings as fearless conquerors who took whatever they wanted. Yeah, not exactly the case here. Sure, there were skirmishes, but mutual interest in trade often overrode the desire for conflict. You're not looking to make enemies, you're looking to make a living. After all, it's hard to trade with someone who's trying to put an arrow through your helmet. Speaking of helmets, let's clear the air. No horns. Forget the cartoonish image of horned helmets. Those were about as common as a peaceful family dinner in a saga. In reality, your helmet is a practical piece of kit, designed to keep your skull intact, not to impress at a costume party. So why didn't the Vikings settle permanently in the New World, despite these initial successes? Well, the reasons are as complex as the fjords back home. For starters, Vinland's not exactly a hop, skip, and jump from Greenland. That's a logistical nightmare of epic proportions. Supply lines are stretched thin, and the cost of maintaining a permanent settlement is astronomical. We're talking about resources, manpower, and a lot of risks. Remember, the Nar only holds so much, and every trip is a gamble with nature and time. Moreover, the political landscape back home is in constant flux. Greenland itself is a tough place to call home, and Iceland isn't exactly a walk in the park either. The Norse world is a patchwork of alliances, rivalries, and fragile peace treaties. Abandoning those connections for an uncertain future across the ocean. That's a tough sell, even for the most adventurous among you. And let's not forget the human factor. You're far from home, surrounded by unfamiliar faces and a foreign land that, quite frankly, doesn't make life easy. The thrill of adventure might be alluring, but the comfort of familiar shores often wins out. It's one thing to explore the edge of the world. It's another to make it your permanent address. The promise of Vinland is real, but so are the challenges. The land offers potential, yet it demands resilience. It's a constant negotiation between dreams and reality, a balancing act where every decision counts. And as you stand on the shores of this new world, you can't help but feel the pull of both the known and the unknown, two sides of the same coin, each with its own risks and rewards. So, as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the land, you find yourself pondering the possibilities. Tomorrow brings another day of trade, exploration, and perhaps a touch of diplomacy. The saga continues, with each chapter unfolding in a way that's both familiar and foreign. Here, S to the next page, where the story of Vinland is written one day at a time. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the land, you find yourself pondering the possibilities. Tomorrow brings another day of trade, exploration, and perhaps a touch of diplomacy. But before tomorrow's dawn, there's the afternoon to tackle, with its own set of challenges and chores that need your attention. Welcome to the grind of Viking life, where every task is a cog in the wheel of survival. First up on the agenda, hunting. Forget the Hollywood image of a lone Viking charging into the wilderness with nothing but an axe and a battle cry. Reality check. Hunting is a team sport, and it's as much about strategy as it is about strength. You and a few others form a small hunting party, each equipped with bows, arrows, and the occasional spear. The goal isn't just to bring home a trophy. It's about putting food on the table and making sure the community doesn't go to bed with a chorus of growling stomachs. The landscape around Vinland is a mixed bag of dense forests and open meadows, each with its own set of challenges. Tracking game requires patience and a keen eye, skills honed over years of necessity. You're not here to flex your muscles, but to outwit your prey. And while you might dream of bagging a deer or two, the reality is that smaller game like rabbits and birds are more common catches. Every bit helps, and the community relies on this bounty to make the most out of every meal. Back at the settlement, the air is thick with the sound of metal on metal. Tool making is in full swing, another communal task that's as essential as it is arduous. Here, where the blacksmiths flex their creative muscles, turning raw iron into tools and weapons. It's a process that involves more than just brute force. It's about precision and skill, a delicate dance of hammer and anvil. The clang of metal is a symphony of survival, each tool a testament to the ingenuity that keeps the settlement running. Now, let's debunk another myth while we're at it. The image of Vikings as brawny warriors swinging swords and axes is only half the story. Sure, they could wield weapons with deadly efficiency, but they were also craftsmen, traders, and settlers. And here's a nugget that might surprise you. Women played crucial roles in this society, far beyond the confines of the home. Viking women were no shrinking violets. They managed households, oversaw farms, and even took part in trading ventures. In some cases, they led expeditions and wielded power in their communities. Recent archaeological finds suggest that women might have even participated in battles, challenging the long-held belief that Viking warfare was a strictly male domain. So forget the idea that women were just damsels in distress waiting for their warrior husbands to return. They were just as integral to the fabric of Viking life as the men. Cooperation is the name of the game here. The romanticized image of the lone Viking warrior, charging into the fray with reckless abandon, doesn't hold water when you're trying to carve out a life in a new world. Survival depends on teamwork, whether it's building a shelter, repairing a ship, or planning a hunting foray. It's a community effort, and every member has a role to play, ensuring that the settlement not only survives but thrives. Let's not forget the economic angle in all this. The tools forged today might be used tomorrow to fell trees or repair the gnar, enabling trade that could bring in much-needed resources. Each arrowhead crafted is a potential meal on the table, and every sturdy rope twisted is a step toward securing the bounty of the sea. It's a constant balancing act of resources, labor, and time, where each task feeds into the next. And speaking of feeding into the next, let's address the social organization. The Vikings operated on a system that was surprisingly democratic for its time. Decisions affecting the community were often made in gatherings known as things, where free men, and in some cases, women, could voice their concerns and vote on matters. This wasn't the top-down hierarchy you might expect from a martial society. Instead, it was a network of relationships and obligations, each person's status determined by their contributions to the community. But don't let the word, democratic, fool you into thinking it was a utopia of equality. Social status still played a significant role, with chieftains and wealthy landowners holding sway over the less fortunate. The thing was as much about negotiation and influence as it was about fairness, a reminder that politics is as old as humanity itself, complete with its own brand of intrigue and ambition. As the day winds down, the tasks completed, and the spoils of the hunt shared among the group, you find yourself reflecting on the myth versus the reality of Viking life. It's a world where stories of heroism and conquest often overshadow the mundane but essential work that keeps the community afloat. The sagas might celebrate warriors and kings, but it's the everyday heroes, the hunters, the craftsmen, the women who run households and farms, who truly embody the spirit of the Viking Age. So, as night falls and the settlement begins to settle into the quiet of evening, you can't help but appreciate the complex tapestry of life in Vinland. It's a mix of old and new, myth and reality, each thread woven together to create a story that's as rich and varied as the land itself. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities, but for now you rest, knowing that you're part of something bigger than yourself, a community striving to carve out a place in the world, one day at a time. As the stars begin to twinkle overhead, you find yourself drawn to the heart of the settlement, the communal hall, where the evening's gathering is set to unfold. It's not just a place for warmth and shelter. It's the beating heart of your small Viking world. Here, stories are shared, plans are made, and bonds are forged. The hall is alive with the crackle of the fire and the low murmur of voices, each one a thread in the tapestry of this fledgling settlement. The evening kicks off with storytelling, a time-honored tradition that's as vital as any meal. Forget Netflix and chill. This is the original binge-watching, where sagas are spun with the skill of a master weaver. The stories are epic, filled with gods, heroes, and battles that make today's reality TV look tame. But let's be clear, these aren't just tales of glory and conquest. They're moral lessons, cultural touchstones, and social glue all rolled into one. And speaking of glue, the stories often feature Odin, the one-eyed chief of the gods, who sacrificed his peeper for wisdom. Now, that's what I call commitment. The tales are infused with lessons on bravery, loyalty, and the occasional bit of divine trickery. They're a window into what the Vikings valued, and a reminder that even gods had to play the long game sometimes. It's a bit like a medieval TED Talk, where the stakes are high and the lessons timeless. As the night deepens, talk turns to the religious rituals that pepper Viking life. You might think of Vikings as all brawn and no brain, but their spiritual world is rich and complex. It's a mix of pagan beliefs, where every tree and stone holds a spirit, and the gods are never far from mind. Sacrifices, though not necessarily the humankind Hollywood loves to exaggerate, are made to ensure favor and fortune. Animals, food, or crafted goods might be offered, a tangible exchange with the divine for a bountiful harvest or a safe journey. But let's not put a halo over it. Religion in Viking times isn't just about reverence. It's also about control and community. The rituals are as much about social cohesion as they are about spiritual enlightenment. You're not just placating the gods. You're reinforcing the bonds that keep this tenuous settlement from unraveling like an old woolen sock. Now let's tackle the elephant, or rather, the longship, in the room. Why the Viking presence in North America didn't last. It's tempting to picture them as the ultimate adventurers, always on the hunt for new horizons. But reality is more complicated. For starters, the logistics are a nightmare. Vinland is a whopping 1,000 miles away from the nearest Viking settlement in Greenland. That's like trying to maintain a long-distance relationship when your only mode of communication is a rowing boat. The sheer distance stretches supply lines thinner than a Viking's patience during a long winter. Every trip is a gamble, with the odds stacked against you. Add to that the fact that the climate is exactly tropical paradise. Harsh winters and unpredictable weather make farming a challenge and survival a constant struggle. You're not just battling the elements, you're waging war against attrition. And then there's the political landscape. Back in Iceland and Greenland, things are as stable as a three-legged table. The Norse world is rife with feuds, alliances, and power plays that make Game of Thrones look like child's play. Settling permanently in Vinland means cutting ties with these intricate networks, a risk many aren't willing to take. The lure of new lands is strong, but the pull of home is stronger. But perhaps the biggest factor is the human element. The indigenous peoples of North America, the ancestors of today's First Nations, are no pushovers. They know the land and its secrets in ways the Vikings can only dream of. While initial encounters might involve trade, tensions simmer beneath the surface. The Vikings, for all their bravery and bravado, are outsiders in a land that's already spoken for. So, what's the lasting impact of this brief Norse adventure in North America? Well, it's a testament to the Viking spirit of exploration and the human drive to push boundaries. They were among the first Europeans to set foot on this continent, centuries before Columbus bungled his way to the Caribbean. Their presence left a mark, even if it's more of a whisper in the wind than a shout from the mountaintops. In the grand tapestry of history, the Vikings in Vinland are a footnote, but they're an important one. They remind us that history is full of near misses and might-have-beens, where paths not taken are as significant as those that were. The Viking spirit of adventure, curiosity, and resilience lives on, inspiring generations to look beyond the horizon and ask, what if? As the night wears on and the fire burns low, you reflect on the day's events and the wider world beyond this small settlement. For the Vikings, the world is a place of endless possibility and danger, where the line between myth and reality is as blurred as the horizon at sea. They're driven by the same desires that fuel us today: the search for new opportunities, the urge to connect, and the quest to leave a mark on the world. Our modern fascination with Vikings isn't just about the swords and sagas. It's about the human spirit they embody. They remind us that even in a world of uncertainty and challenge, there's room for adventure, discovery, and the pursuit of something greater. As you drift off to sleep, the stories of the day still echoing in your mind, you realize that the Viking legacy isn't just about the past. It's about the future and the possibilities it holds. So here's to the Vikings, the dreamers and doers who remind us that sometimes the greatest journeys are the ones that take us beyond the edge of the map and into the unknown. As the fire flickers and fades, you're left with a sense of connection to those who came before and a curiosity about what lies ahead. After all, the world is vast, and history is just waiting to be made, one bold step at a time. In the grand drama of history, empires rise and fall with all the drama of a soap opera, and the Indian subcontinent has seen its fair share of these epic tales. Let's dive into the story of how the Gupta Empire took center stage after the Maurya Empire bowed out, leaving behind a political mess that even the best of spin doctors would struggle to clean up. The Maurya Empire, a behemoth of its time, ruled from 322 to 185 BCE. It was the brainchild of Chandragupta Maurya, a guy who, according to legend, was a nobody who became a somebody faster than you can say rags to riches. He was the OG unifier of India, pulling together a collection of squabbling states into one of the largest empires of the ancient world. But like all good things, the Mauryan dynasty couldn't keep it together forever. By 185 BCE, the empire had crumbled faster than a cookie in milk, leaving behind a mess of fragmented territories, each vying for a slice of the power pie. Cue the political chaos. After the Maryas, India was a patchwork quilt of petty kingdoms and regional powers, each with its own king, each believing he was the best thing since sliced bread. Though in fairness, sliced bread was still a couple of millennia away from being a thing. The political landscape was a Game of Thrones, minus the dragons, but with no shortage of intrigue and backstabbing. Enter stage left, Sri Gupta, around 240 CE. Now, if you're expecting a grand entrance with fireworks, you might be a bit disappointed. Old Sri is exactly the kind of historical figure that gets entire chapters in history textbooks. But what he did was lay the foundation for what would become a golden age, the Gupta Empire. Think of him as the unsung hero, or perhaps more fittingly, the guy who started a chain reaction that led to something much bigger than himself. Sri Gupta's rise wasn't about conquering lands with overwhelming military might. No, he was more about using his noggin. Political savvy was his game. In a world where everyone was swinging swords, he was playing the long game, building alliances, and marrying off his family like it was a strategic game of chess. He was the kind of leader who understood that sometimes a well-placed bribe or a strategic marriage could achieve more than 1,000 soldiers ever could. By the time Sri Gupta's descendants took over, they were ready to expand their influence further. They weren't just inheriting a throne. They were inheriting a playbook on how to manage a gaggle of territorial warlords who thought they were hot stuff. The Gupta dynasty's real talent lay in uniting these fragmented territories not by brute force, but with wit and negotiation. This was an empire built on the art of the deal, long before that phrase was a thing. As Sri Gupta's lineage expanded, so did their territory. They capitalized on economic growth, cultivated trade routes that stretched across the known world, and ensured the wealth flowed through their lands like a never-ending river of gold. The Guptas were not just rulers. They were brand managers of ancient India, making sure everyone knew their empire was the place to be. They turned the political chaos of post-Maurya India into a cohesive, and dare we say, harmonious empire, setting the stage for what historians would later call the Golden Age of India. So, as we set the stage for the rise of the Gupta Empire, remember this. It wasn't built overnight, and it wasn't built on conquest alone. It was crafted by shrewd leaders who understood that sometimes you don't need to conquer with swords when you can conquer with strategy, charisma, and a little bit of good old-fashioned cunning. The Guptas were the masters of turning a chaotic patchwork into a tapestry of prosperity, and their story is just getting started. Stick around, because the golden age they usher in is one for the history books, literally. So, as the Gupta Empire gears up for its golden age, enter Chandragupta I, the man who would take this budding dynasty and crank it up to 11. If you think of the Gupta Empire as a startup, Chandragupta I was the guy who turned it into a unicorn. He didn't just inherit a throne. He inherited a playbook filled with cunning strategies and a family legacy that was more about brain than brawn. Picture him as the Steve Jobs of ancient India, but instead of iPhones, he was selling the idea of a unified and prosperous empire. Chandragupta I didn't just sit on his hands waiting for things to happen. No, he was a man of action, charisma, and perhaps most importantly, strategic marriage. Yep, you heard that right. In 308 CE, he married Princess Kumaradvi of the powerful Likavi clan. Now, this wasn't just a case of love at first sight. It was more like love at first strategic advantage. This marriage was like merging two megacorporations, expanding his influence and resources. It wasn't just about the heart, it was about the art of empire building. With this alliance, Chandragupta I effectively doubled his power base like a savvy chess player who just cornered his opponent's king. Now, here's where myth and reality start to tango in the grand ballroom of history. The romanticized tales paint Chandragupta I as a visionary leader, galloping through India, uniting people with a smile and a wave. But let's pump the brakes on that fairy tale for a second. Managing a sprawling territory wasn't all sunshine and roses. It was more like herding cats, each with its own agenda. We're talking about a time when communication meant sending a guy on a horse with a message and hoping he didn't get lost or eaten by a tiger. The reality was that Chandragupta I had to be a master diplomat, a shrewd negotiator, and let's be honest, probably had a stress level that could make your average CEO look like they're on perpetual vacation. Now, let's talk about the Gupta economy, which was less of a slow-moving chariot and more of a sleek, high-speed network. The Gupta Empire was like the Amazon Prime of its day, delivering prosperity faster than you could say 2-day shipping. They developed an ingenious tax system that would make any modern economist nod in approval. The Guptas levied taxes not just in coins, but in kind, grains, textiles, you name it. This diversified tax base ensured that the empire's coffers were always jingling with wealth, ready to fund public works and patronize the arts. And let's not forget the infrastructure. The Guptas weren't just about collecting taxes. They were about spending them wisely. They built roads that crisscrossed the empire like a spider's web, facilitating trade and communication. Picture this, a network of roads so efficient that it could rival the Roman Empire's. This wasn't just about moving goods. It was about moving ideas, culture, and people. The roads were the veins through which the lifeblood of the empire flowed, pumping prosperity to even the most distant corners of Gupta territory. Of course, this well-oiled machine of an empire wasn't without its hiccups. Maintaining such an extensive network of roads and a robust economy required constant vigilance, and sometimes a bit of good old-fashioned strong-arming. You see, those roadways also needed patrolling to keep bandits at bay, and the tax collectors had to be more charismatic than a used car salesman trying to sell you a clunker. This was a time when honesty and fair play weren't always top of the agenda, and corruption could sneak in like a thief in the night. Yet, under Chandragupta I's reign, the Gupta Empire flourished, setting the stage for what historians would later dub the Golden Age of India. His leadership was about more than just expanding borders. It was about laying the groundwork for a society that was as rich in culture as it was in gold. The arts, sciences, and philosophy bloomed like never before, a testament to the stability and prosperity he had cultivated. Sure, the romantic tales of his reign might gloss over the gritty details, but the reality was that Chandragupta I was a leader who understood that the key to a successful empire was not just in conquering lands, but in winning hearts and minds. As we leave Chandragupta I to his well-earned legacy, remember this. His reign was not just about what he achieved, but about how he achieved it. It was a complex dance of diplomacy, economics, and occasional arm-twisting that turned a regional power into a continental powerhouse. And while the mythic tales of his exploits might paint him as a benevolent king riding into the sunset, the truth is, his success was built on a foundation of strategic brilliance and relentless drive. Keep your eyes peeled for what's next, because the story of the Gupta Empire is just heating up, and the Golden Age is about to shine brighter than ever. With Chandragupta I's groundwork laid, the Gupta Empire was ready for its next act, and what an act it was. Enter Samudragupta, the empire's answer to a rock star with a penchant for expansion and a flair for the dramatic. Reigning from 335 to 375 CE, he was the kind of ruler who didn't just sit on his laurels. He marched them across India and beyond, leaving a footprint so large it could have been seen from space, if satellites had been a thing back then. Samudragupta was a man on a mission, and that mission was to make the Gupta Empire the talk of the ancient world. He wasn't content with just ruling. He wanted to conquer, and conquer he did. His military campaigns were the stuff of legends, or at least they became legends thanks to the Allahabad pillar inscription. Now, if you're picturing a dusty stone slab, think again. This was the ancient equivalent of a mixtape, detailing his triumphs in such glowing terms that it makes you wonder if his PR team was getting a little too generous with the poetic license. The inscription records Samudragupta's conquests with a flair that would make a modern-day press release look like a grocery list. It boasts of his victories over kings in every direction, like he was collecting them for a royal trading card set. But let's pump the brakes for a second. While it's true that Samudragupta expanded the empire significantly, it wasn't all glorious battles and heroic charges. The reality was more about strategic alliances, subjugation of neighbors, and yes, a fair bit of good old-fashioned coercion. His empire stretched from the Himalayas in the north to the deep south of India, with tributary states paying homage like they were lining up to join the coolest club in town. Under Samudragupta, the Gupta Empire became a cultural powerhouse, rivaling the likes of ancient Greece and Rome. It was during his reign that India saw a flowering of arts and sciences that would make any Renaissance figure green with envy. This was an era when intellectuals like Aryabhata were crunching numbers and writing treatises that would lay the groundwork for modern mathematics. Picture zero, that humble little number we take for granted today, finding its place in the world thanks to the Gupta penchant for innovation. Meanwhile, in the realm of art and literature, poets like Kalidasa were crafting verses that would echo through the ages, their works comparable to Shakespeare's in influence and appeal. But was it all sunshine and roses for Samudragupta? Not exactly. As much as he expanded his empire, managing such a vast territory was like juggling flaming torches, impressive but fraught with danger. Keeping the newly acquired regions in line required more than just a military presence. It called for an intricate web of diplomacy, tribute, and sometimes, yes, the occasional public execution to remind everyone who was boss. It was a delicate balance of power that could topple faster than a house of cards in a stiff breeze. Now, let's talk about the real glue that held this empire together: religion and philosophy. The Gupta era saw a remarkable synthesis of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, which wasn't just a spiritual journey but a political tool. Samudragupta, though a Hindu, was savvy enough to patronize Buddhist and Jain monasteries, ensuring that his rule was seen as inclusive and enlightened. In a time when religious strife could lead to bloody conflicts, his approach was more live and let live, a philosophy that kept the peace and the tax revenue flowing. As Samudragupta's reign came to a close, he handed the reins to his successor, Chandragupta II, also known as Vikramaditya, a name that sounded like it came straight out of a superhero comic. Chandragupta II was the kind of ruler who could charm the sandals off a sage. His reign, from 375 to 415 CE, marked the zenith of the Gupta Golden Age, a time when the empire was not just a political juggernaut, but a cultural beacon. Chandragupta II's strategy was less about swinging swords and more about wielding influence. He expanded the empire westward, not through brute force, but by marrying into the powerful Vakataka dynasty. This was a classic Gupta move, turning marriage into a diplomatic chess piece that secured his western borders without a single arrow fired. Who said romance was dead? Under Chandragupta II, the Gupta Empire became the epicenter of trade, stretching its influence across the vast Indian Ocean. Silk, spices, and precious stones flowed through Gupta territory like a well-oiled machine, making it the envy of merchants from the Roman Empire to Southeast Asia. The bustling port cities were like ancient metropolises, buzzing with activity and commerce. Tax revenue soared, filling the imperial coffers and funding an era of unparalleled prosperity. The cultural landscape was equally vibrant. Literature flourished, with Kalidasa penning his magnum opus, Shakuntala, a play so revered it was translated into multiple languages and performed across continents. Architecture took a leap forward, with the construction of grand temples that showcased not just religious devotion, but artistic mastery. The Gupta artisans were like the Michelangelos of their time, chiseling away at stone to create intricate carvings that still leave modern visitors in awe. Yet behind the glittering facade of gold and glory, the Gupta Empire faced its share of challenges. Maintaining such a vast domain required constant vigilance against internal dissent and external threats. The White Huns, a nomadic group from Central Asia, were like the barbarians at the gate, posing a persistent threat that would soon test the empire's resilience. But that's a saga for another time. As we wrap up this chapter of Gupta history, let's not forget the tapestry woven by these rulers, a blend of military might, strategic alliances, cultural patronage, and religious tolerance. The Guptas weren't just rulers. They were architects of an era whose influence would ripple through history long after their empire crumbled. So, as we gear up for the next installment, remember that the golden age of the Gupta Empire was as much about the legends as it was about the reality. A dazzling dance of power, culture, and ingenuity that still captivates our imaginations today. Stay tuned, because the story of the Gupta Empire is far from over. Turning the page on Gupta history, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of everyday life in this golden age, where the mythical sheen often obscures the mundane reality. The Gupta Empire, often romanticized as a land of harmony and enlightenment, was a tapestry of contradictions, much like a Renaissance fair with a modern-day mosh pit hiding beneath. It's all fun and games until you lose an arm wrestling match with societal norms. Let's start with the role of women, those enigmatic figures often idealized in Gupta literature as paragons of virtue and beauty, much like a Mona Lisa with a side of social restrictions. In reality, though, their lives were a tad less glamorous. Women in the Gupta Empire were celebrated in poetry, sure, but they were also confined by a patriarchal system that would make any modern feminist cringe. They were often married off at a young age, think preteen, not prom queen, and their primary roles were as wives and mothers, with a side gig in managing household affairs. Public life was mostly a no-go zone. The Gupta society was like a well-rehearsed play where everyone had a part, but not everyone got the spotlight. Women of higher social status might have had a bit more leeway, dipping their toes into education or the arts, but those moments were rarer than finding a unicorn at your local petting zoo. For the majority, their world was the domestic sphere, with little room for deviation. And while texts like the Kama Sutra might suggest a society of liberated women, the reality was more restrained, with freedoms often dictated by the whims of their male counterparts rather than their own desires. Now let's talk caste system, an institution as rigid as a Victorian corset and just as uncomfortable. The Gupta era saw this social stratification become more entrenched than ever, the societal equivalent of a game of Jenga with a few too many pieces glued together. This wasn't just a social hierarchy. It was a way of life, dictating everything from your profession to your diet and even who you could hang out with at the ancient water cooler. The caste system was divided into 4 main varnas. Brahmins at the top, the priests and scholars who acted like the VIP section at a party, exclusive and a bit smug. Next came the Kshatriyas, the warriors and kings, who were the action heroes of the ancient world, less capes and tights, more swords and armor. Below them were the Vaishyas, the merchants and landowners who kept the economy ticking over like a well-oiled machine. And finally, the Shudras, the labourers who did the heavy lifting, quite literally at times. Not to forget, outside this system were the untouchables, who handled tasks considered too impure, a stark reminder of the darker side of this societal structure. But like any complex system, it wasn't all doom and gloom. The caste system provided a certain kind of order, a social stability that kept the Gupta society humming along like a finely tuned orchestra. Everyone knew their role, and while upward mobility was about as feasible as walking on water, it did ensure a measure of societal cohesion. It was a double-edged sword, providing structure but also fostering division, a bit like building a house of cards where one false move could bring the whole system crashing down. Now, let's pivot from social structures to intellectual life, where the Gupta Empire truly shone like a beacon in the ancient world. Enter Nalanda University, or as I like to call it, the ancient Ivy League, minus the frat parties, but with all the intellectual rigor. Founded around the 5th century CE, Nalanda was the place to be for anyone with a thirst for knowledge. Picture a sprawling campus with majestic libraries, lecture halls, and dormitories that housed students from across Asia, all there to soak up wisdom like sponges. Nalanda was more than just a place of learning. It was a melting pot of ideas, an intellectual cauldron bubbling over with innovation and debate. Subjects ranged from Buddhist studies to mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, making it the ancient equivalent of a multidisciplinary college. Think of it as the Hogwarts of the East, but with fewer broomsticks and more scrolls. The scholars here were the rock stars of their time, with names like Aryabhata and Nagarjuna echoing through the corridors, their contributions laying the groundwork for advancements in various fields. But let's not romanticize this too much. Life at Nalanda wasn't all philosophical debates and intellectual enlightenment. Students faced rigorous discipline and an academic workload that would make today's college syllabus look like a walk in the park. The pursuit of knowledge was serious business, and the pressure to excel was immense. Yet, despite these challenges, Nalanda thrived, leaving a legacy that would influence educational institutions for centuries to come. As we explore the Gupta society, it's clear that the Golden Age was as much about the glitter as it was about the grit. It was a time of great achievements and stark realities, a period of dazzling cultural and intellectual growth set against a backdrop of social constraints and rigid hierarchies. The myths might paint a picture of an idyllic society, but the reality was a complex mosaic, a blend of light and shade that reflected the true nature of human civilization. As we pause here, ready to dive into the next chapter of Gupta history, remember this. The story of this empire is more than just a tale of kings and conquests. It's a narrative of people and progress, of societal norms and intellectual achievements, all woven together in the rich tapestry of history. Stay tuned, because the saga of the Gupta Empire still has plenty of twists and turns to reveal, and this golden age is far from over. The Gupta Empire, a dazzling tapestry woven with threads of prosperity and culture, now faced the grim reality of fraying at the edges. Picture an empire that had shone like a beacon of enlightenment, now under siege from both within and without. The decline began less like a sudden earthquake and more like a slow erosion, a testament to the age-old truth that all good things must come to an end, especially when external invaders show up like uninvited dinner guests with a penchant for destruction. The White Huns, or Hephthalites if you're feeling posh, were the rowdy neighbors from Central Asia who decided it was time to crash the Gupta party around the mid-5th century CE. These were not your average tourists, mind you. They were more like the ancient equivalent of an unwelcome rock band on a rampage, determined to leave their mark and maybe pillage a little along the way. Led by their infamous ruler Mihirakula, whose name alone could send shivers down the spine of even the bravest of Gupta warriors, the Huns wreaked havoc on the Indian subcontinent. Their initial incursions might have seemed like a passing nuisance, but soon enough they became a relentless tide, battering the once impervious Gupta defenses. The Huns were a force to be reckoned with, their military prowess honed through years of battling across Central Asia. They attacked with a ferocity that made the Gupta military, already stretched thin, look like a popgun against a cannon. Despite valiant efforts to repel these invasions, the Guptas were fighting a losing battle. Think of it as trying to patch a sinking ship with a bucket and some hope. The Huns, with their swift cavalry and brutal tactics, cut a swath through the northern territories, leaving devastation in their wake. By the time they were done, the Gupta Empire was like a once mighty oak, hollowed out by termites and ready to topple at the slightest breeze. But external threats were only part of the story. Internally, the Gupta Empire was dealing with its own set of issues, like an aging rock star struggling with a chaotic band falling apart. Overexpansion had stretched resources thin, and the decentralized nature of their administration meant that local governors often acted more like independent contractors than loyal bureaucrats. Corruption was rife, and loyalty was a commodity that could be bought and sold as easily as spices in the bustling markets. Economic pressures added to the strain, with the costs of constant military campaigns draining the treasury faster than water through a sieve. The once thriving trade routes, those arteries of wealth that had fueled the empire's prosperity, became increasingly vulnerable to disruption. The Huns weren't just after territory. They were after the riches that flowed through the empire, and their raids made trade as perilous as crossing a rickety bridge during monsoon season. As revenues dwindled, so too did the empire's ability to maintain its infrastructure, leading to a slow but steady decline in the public works that had once been the pride of the Gupta regime. Despite these challenges, it wasn't all doom and gloom. The legacy of the Gupta Empire endured, a testament to its once great achievements. This was an era that had given birth to pioneering advancements in mathematics, astronomy, and art, achievements that would echo through the corridors of history long after the empire itself had crumbled to dust. The concept of zero, a revolutionary idea that would become the cornerstone of modern mathematics, emerged during this time, as did significant advancements in trigonometry and algebra. Aryabhata, the mathematical prodigy, calculated the value of pi and speculated about the Earth's rotation, centuries before such ideas were widely accepted. Culturally, the Gupta period left an indelible mark on Indian art and literature. The temples and sculptures from this time, with their intricate carvings and elaborate designs, set a standard of beauty and craftsmanship that would influence generations. The literary works of Kalidasa, with their lyrical beauty and profound themes, became timeless classics, echoing the human experience in a way that transcended the boundaries of time and place. And let's give a nod to the architectural wonders, those stone monuments that have withstood the test of time better than any empire ever could. The Ajanta caves, with their mesmerizing frescoes, are a testament to the artistic prowess of the Guptas, a visual narrative carved into the cliffs that tells stories of gods and men, of love and loss, of triumph and tragedy. These artistic achievements were not just about aesthetics. They were a reflection of the society's values, beliefs, and aspirations, offering us a window into a world that once was. In the end, the Gupta Empire's decline was as much about the natural cycle of rise and fall as it was about external invasions or internal decay. Empires, like stars, burn brightly and eventually fade, leaving behind the elements from which new worlds are born. The Guptas had created a golden age that had set a high bar for those who followed, a legacy that would inspire and challenge future rulers. Today, the Gupta era is remembered with a sense of awe and nostalgia, often romanticized as a period when India was at the pinnacle of its cultural and intellectual achievements. In scholarly circles, the Guptas are studied as a case study of a successful empire, one that balanced military might with cultural patronage, religious tolerance with political acumen. In popular culture, they are often depicted as the epitome of ancient Indian civilization, their achievements celebrated in textbooks, documentaries, and even Bollywood films. So, as we wrap up this saga of the Gupta Empire, remember that history is a mosaic of stories, some triumphant, some tragic, but all woven together to create the rich tapestry of our past. The Guptas, with their blend of innovation and tradition, left an enduring legacy that continues to shape the narrative of Indian history. Their story is a reminder that while empires may rise and fall, the ideas and achievements they leave behind are immortal, whispering through the ages to those who care to listen. As you drift off to sleep, let the echoes of the Gupta Empire's golden age lull you into dreams of a time when art and science flourished, even amidst the chaos of an empire on the brink. If you were wandering around central Mexico in the early 14th century, you might have seen a group of people seemingly lost in the wilderness, like tourists without a map app. These folks were the Mexica, later known as the Aztecs, and they were on a quest for a place to call home. Led by a prophecy promising greatness, wherever they found an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a snake, they finally stumbled upon this vision in 1325. And where was this promised land, you ask? An island in Lake Texcoco, essentially a soggy, mosquito-ridden swamp. It's like winning the lottery and finding out the prize is a timeshare in a marsh. So, what do you do when your divine real estate agent points you to a neighborhood where the fish are your closest neighbors? You get innovative. The Mexica rolled up their sleeves and started turning their watery wasteland into something resembling a metropolis. They built Tenochtitlan, the shining capital of the Aztec Empire, and they didn't let a little thing like geography rain on their parade. With a knack for engineering that would make any STEM major proud, they constructed chinampas, or floating gardens, to cultivate crops. Imagine a hydroponic system, but with more dirt and less lead lighting. These creations, made from layers of mud and vegetation piled onto wooden frames, not only fed the growing population, but also doubled as Venice-style highways connecting the city. The Mexica weren't just engineering whizzes, they were also political masterminds. In a region already crowded with other city-states, you'd think they'd be content with their little patch of swampy paradise. But no, these folks had ambition. They allied with neighboring cities, forming the Triple Alliance with Texcoco and Tlacopan around 1428. It was like forming a band with your two coolest friends, but instead of dropping beats, they were dropping armies on anyone who dared cross them. This alliance was a game-changer. The Mexica went from the new kids on the block to the ones running the block, thanks to a mix of diplomacy and, well, a fair amount of intimidation. They understood that in the Valley of Mexico, you either conquered or got conquered. By aligning with local powers and strategically marrying into influential families, because who needs tinder when you're building an empire? They secured their place in the annals of history. Speaking of history, let's pause to debunk a myth here. The Aztecs are often painted as barbaric, bloodthirsty warriors obsessed with human sacrifice. While it's true they had a penchant for offering a heart or two to the gods, think of it as an extreme form of tithing. This narrative oversimplifies a complex society with sophisticated systems of governance, commerce, and art. They were no more savage than their European counterparts, who were busy burning witches and throwing the occasional heretic on the pyre. But back to Tenochtitlan. By the mid-15th century, it had grown into a bustling urban centre with a population of around 200,000, making it one of the largest cities in the world at the time. Imagine a metropolis filled with bustling markets, towering temples, and causeways extending like arms into the lake, all constructed with a level of precision that would make even the pickiest modern urban planner nod in approval. And all of this was smack dab in the middle of a lake. Talk about waterfront property. The city's layout was as organized as a Marie Kondo closet, with districts dedicated to specific trades and crafts. There were markets that could rival any modern-day shopping mall, albeit with more obsidian knives and fewer food courts. Tlatelolco, the largest market, was the place to be if you were in the mood for some bartering. Everything from jade to jaguar skins was on offer, and by the accounts of the Spanish who later visited, the vibrancy of Tenochtitlan's markets was one of the most astonishing things they witnessed. And let's not forget the political acumen that allowed the Mexica to maintain control. They instituted a tribute system that would make any tax collector green with envy. Conquered regions were required to pay tribute in the form of goods. Think textiles, cacao, and feathers, not the take a penny, leave a penny system. This not only enriched Tenochtitlan, but also reinforced the Mexica's dominance over the Valley of Mexico. It was a classic carrot-and-stick approach, with the carrot being a promise of protection and trade, and the stick being, well, a very sharp obsidian blade. So here they were, the Mexica, turning a swamp into a powerhouse of culture and economy, all the while navigating the delicate dance of power in a region where alliances were as fragile as a teenage relationship. They were making it work, through a combination of innovation, negotiation, and a little bit of intimidation. Their story was just beginning, but already it was clear that the Mexica were not just finding their place in the world, they were reshaping it. And so, with Tenochtitlan flourishing like a desert bloom after a rare rain, the Aztecs were hitting their stride in this land of mud and ambition. But what truly fueled this empire's engine? Spoiler alert. It wasn't just divine intervention or a knack for real estate in suboptimal locations. It was agriculture and trade, the bread and butter, or in this case, maize and cacao, of their booming economy. Let's start with the Chinampas, those brainy floating gardens that made even the most barren patches of water sing with life. Picture this. Rectangular plots constructed with layers of mud, lake sediment, and decaying vegetation, creating a fertile wonderland that could produce up to 7 harvests each year. Yes, you heard right. 7. Talk about overachieving in the plant department. These Chinampas were a masterstroke of ecological engineering, allowing the Aztecs to feed a city that ballooned to around 200,000 people. That's like nourishing an entire modern-day city without the help of a single food truck. The Aztecs grew everything from maize and beans to squashes and chilies, the building blocks of a diet that would make any nutritionist nod approvingly. And for a little protein, they turned to the surrounding waters, harvesting fish and waterfowl that flitted across the lake's surface. It wasn't all kale and quinoa, but it was a diet that kept the masses fed and the warriors strong. Now, let's talk tribute. The Aztecs didn't just rely on their homegrown goodies. They had a knack for, shall we say, outsourcing. Conquered territories were required to cough up tribute, essentially a tax paid in goods rather than gold. We're talking textiles, precious stones, and cocoa beans, a currency so valuable it was practically the Bitcoin of its time. These tributes flowed into Tenochtitlan like a river of riches, bolstering the economy and ensuring the emperor could afford the most extravagant feathered headdresses money could buy. This tribute system wasn't just about hoarding wealth. It was a strategic move to keep conquered peoples in check. By demanding regular payments, the Aztecs maintained a grip on their empire, a lesson in the fine art of Caratan stick diplomacy. This wasn't a simple protection racket, though. It was more like a membership to an exclusive club where the dues kept the Aztec war machine well-oiled and their temples well-maintained. Speaking of commerce, you couldn't swing a jaguar pelt in Tenochtitlan without hitting a market stall. The granddaddy of them all was Tlatlolco, a bustling marketplace that was the ancient equivalent of a global trading hub. Here, you could find anything from obsidian blades to vibrant feathers, with merchants hawking their wares like it was the Black Friday of the 15th century. The market was a sensory overload of colors, sounds, and smells, a place where bartering was an art form and haggling a competitive sport. Even the most seasoned modern-day bargain hunter would be put to shame by the Aztec merchant's skills. What's truly fascinating is how this trade network extended far beyond the borders of the empire. Goods flowed in from as far away as the Gulf Coast, the Maya regions, and even what is now the southwestern United States. It was a web of commerce and culture, a testament to the Aztecs' ability to turn their city into a beacon for traders from all corners of Mesoamerica. The Aztecs weren't just participants in this economy. They were the conductors of a symphony of trade that made Tenochtitlan the envy of the ancient world. But let's not get carried away with romantic notions of bustling markets and gleaming temples. The reality was that this prosperity came with its fair share of challenges. The tribute system, while effective, bred resentment among the subjugated peoples. After all, no one likes being strong-armed into handing over their hardened goods, even if the alternative is a not-so-friendly visit from the Aztec military. This resentment would simmer beneath the surface, a ticking time bomb waiting for the right spark to ignite. Yet, for the time being, the Aztecs were riding high on their wave of success, their city a marvel of ingenuity and ambition. They had built an empire from the swampy ground up, transforming Tenochtitlan into a hub of culture and commerce that drew people like moths to a flame. But as the saying goes, the brighter the flame, the faster it burns, and storm clouds were already gathering on the horizon. For now, though, the Aztecs were masters of their domain, their story a testament to the power of innovation and the allure of ambition. And as they continued to expand their influence, they were about to discover the perils that come with being at the top of the world. As the Aztec Empire basked in its golden age, its spiritual life was something to behold, or perhaps to fear, depending on your perspective. To understand the Aztec mindset, you need to grasp their spiritual worldview, which was as complex as a soap opera plot and just as dramatic. Imagine a pantheon of gods that demanded not just respect, but offerings of the most visceral kind, human sacrifice. Yes, you heard right. We're not talking fruit baskets and incense here. To the Aztecs, spilling human blood was a divine necessity, a way to keep the cosmic gears well-oiled. If you think that sounds a bit intense, you're not alone. But let's dissect this with the curiosity of a cat who knows it's got more than 9 lives. At the heart of Aztec spirituality was the belief that the universe was in a constant state of precarious balance. The gods, particularly Huitzilopochtli, the sun god and patron deity of Tenochtitlan, needed sustenance to keep the sun moving across the sky. And what better fuel for this celestial journey than human hearts delivered fresh from the altar? This might sound gruesome, but in the Aztec worldview, it was a sacred duty, a grim kind of insurance policy against cosmic collapse. It's like paying your utility bill with a side of existential dread. Contrary to popular belief, the Aztecs didn't go around sacrificing people willy-nilly. There was a method to their macabre madness. Victims were often prisoners of war, and the so-called flowery wars were battles staged specifically to capture sacrificial candidates. These wars were less about territorial conquest and more of an ancient draft for the universe's survival game. It was a grim reminder that in the Aztec cosmos, everyone had a part to play, whether they liked it or not. But let's not paint the Aztecs as mere bloodthirsty zealots. Their religious practices were deeply woven into the fabric of society, reinforcing social hierarchies and political power. The priests, who orchestrated these ceremonies, were the rock stars of their day, wielding influence as they climbed the temple steps, obsidian knives in hand. These bloodletting ceremonies were public spectacles, drawing crowds like an ancient Mesoamerican Super Bowl. And much like today's influencers, the priests knew the power of a good performance. Human sacrifice wasn't just a cosmic necessity, it was also a political tool. By staging these elaborate ceremonies, the Aztec rulers showcased their divine favor and cemented their authority. It was a powerful reminder to the masses that their leaders were the intermediaries with the gods, keeping the world from spiraling into chaos. This divine mandate was a handy way to keep everyone in line, ensuring that the pyramid of power remained firmly in place. Of course, not every day was a sacrificial jamboree. The Aztecs had a rich tapestry of festivals and rituals that celebrated everything from the harvest to the changing seasons. These events were as much about communal bonding as they were about appeasing the gods. Picture vibrant dances, elaborate costumes, and enough food to feed an army, or at least keep one from revolting. The emperor often played host, turning these gatherings into opportunities to display wealth and reinforce alliances. It's the ancient equivalent of hosting a gala, but with more feathers and fewer tuxedos. The Aztec calendar, a marvel of mathematical precision, was divided into two cycles, the 260-day tonal pohuali and the 365-day Zu pohuali. Together, they formed a 52-year cycle that dictated religious and agricultural events. This cyclical view of time was central to the Aztec worldview, a reminder that history was a repeating loop rather than a straight line. It's like living in a perpetual Groundhog Day, but with more human sacrifice and less Bill Murray. Myth-busting time. While the image of the Aztecs as relentless sacrificers makes for a dramatic storyline, it overlooks the grandeur and sophistication of their civilization. Their intricate rituals were part of a broader cultural landscape that included breathtaking art, advanced astronomy, and a society run with remarkable efficiency. The Aztecs were as much architects of culture as they were architects of temples. So, while they might have been in the market for a few too many hearts for our modern sensibilities, they also gave us a legacy of innovation and artistry that continues to captivate us. What's truly fascinating is how these religious practices dovetailed with the Aztec economy. Sacrifices were not just spiritual events, but economic ones, too. They served as a stark reminder of the empire's power, a way to ensure tribute kept flowing and vassal states thought twice before shirking their obligations. The gruesome spectacle underscored the consequences of defiance, turning the sacrificial altar into both a religious and a political stage. This duality of Aztec spirituality, a blend of reverence and ruthlessness, was a cornerstone of their society. It allowed them to navigate the complexities of empire building, reinforcing their dominance while maintaining a semblance of cosmic order. The Aztecs believed that they were the chosen people, destined to keep the world turning, even if it meant getting their hands a little dirty, or a lot, depending on the size of the ceremony. Yet this reliance on divine favor and human sacrifice was a double-edged sword. While it reinforced the social order and kept the empire's machinery humming, it also sowed seeds of resentment. Conquered peoples forced to sacrifice their own and pay tribute, harbored grudges that simmered beneath the surface. It was a delicate balance, one that kept the Aztec Empire on its toes, constantly vigilant for signs of rebellion or dissent. As we dig deeper into the Aztec psyche, we'll see how this intricate dance of devotion and dominance shaped their world. It's a story that's far from over, with twists and turns that would put any modern drama to shame. So stay tuned as we continue to unravel the mysteries of this fascinating civilization, exploring the heights of its achievements and the depths of its ambitions. The Aztecs were more than just players on the stage of history. They were its authors, crafting a narrative as rich and complex as the cosmos they revered. As the Aztecs danced on the brink of history, their story was about to collide with forces they had never anticipated. Enter Hernán Cortés in 1519, a man who came with grand ambitions, a scrappy band of adventurers, and a severe case of wanderlust. His arrival in the New World was less of a gentle knock and more of a battering ram at the gates. Here we are, folks, at the crossroads of civilizations, where the Aztec Empire, with its labyrinthine politics and cosmic rituals, met the steel and greed of the Spanish conquistadors. Now, Cortés wasn't exactly sent by the Spanish crown with a bouquet and a friendly note. Nope, he was more of a rogue agent, a man whose orders were more flexible guidelines than strict commands. He landed on the Yucatan Peninsula with about 600 men, 16 horses, and a handful of cannons. An entourage that looked less like an invasion force and more like a particularly ambitious Renaissance fair. But appearances can be deceiving. Within a few short years, Cortés would topple one of the most formidable empires in the world. How's that for an overachiever? Let's unpack the arrival of Cortés and the monumental clash that followed. When the Spaniards first set eyes on Tenochtitlan, they were gobsmacked. Here was a city that was as dazzling as any in Europe, a sprawling metropolis with a population of about 200,000, built on a lake and buzzing with life. Imagine stepping into a city that seemed to float on water, with canals crisscrossing through it like veins of commerce. For the Spanish, it was an alien world, both fascinating and ripe for conquest. Moctezuma II, the Aztec emperor at the time, was no fool. He was the head honcho of a vast empire, and he didn't get there by ignoring the political winds. But when reports of strange, bearded men arriving on the coast reached him, he found himself in a bind. Should he greet these newcomers as gods, as some of his advisors suggested, or as potential threats? In a move that would make any armchair strategist cringe, Moctezuma chose to welcome Cortés, showering him with gifts and gold, hoping to appease these mysterious visitors. Moctezuma's decision was a political misstep of epic proportions. By treating Cortés as an honored guest, he inadvertently invited the fox into the henhouse. Cortés played along, accepting the lavish hospitality while quietly plotting his next move. He recognized the fractures in the Aztec tributary system and saw an opportunity to exploit them. You see, many of the regions under Aztec rule weren't exactly thrilled with their overlords. They grumbled about high tributes and the occasional human sacrifice. Cortés, ever the opportunist, tapped into this discontent, forging alliances with disgruntled tribes like the Tlaxcalans. It's worth noting that not everyone in the Aztec court was on board with Moctezuma's diplomatic overtures. Some saw the writing on the wall and urged more aggressive measures. But hindsight is 20/20, and the emperor's cautious approach would soon backfire spectacularly. In November 1519, Cortés and his merry band marched into Tenochtitlan, and Moctezuma welcomed them with open arms, or at least a polite nod. Not long after, the Spanish took Moctezuma hostage, a brazen move that sent shockwaves through the empire. The situation quickly spiraled into chaos. The Aztecs, realizing they were being played, revolted. The tension reached a boiling point during the infamous Night of Sorrows, or La Noche Triste, in June 1520. The Spanish, along with their native allies, attempted a hasty retreat from Tenochtitlan under the cover of darkness. It was a disaster. They were ambushed by Aztec warriors, losing roughly half their men, along with precious gold and artillery. Cortés himself reportedly sat under a tree and wept, though I doubt he shed any tears over the lost gold. The Aztecs had struck a blow, but this was far from the end. Ah, but here's the plot twist that no one saw coming. While the Aztecs celebrated their brief victory, a more insidious enemy was already at work. Smallpox, that microscopic conqueror, had hitched a ride with the Spaniards and was now spreading like wildfire through the dense population of Tenochtitlan. This was the unseen vanguard of the European invasion, more devastating than any musket or sword. Smallpox tore through the Aztec population with merciless efficiency, killing tens of thousands, including many of their leaders. It was the Grim Reaper's rave, and no one was on the guest list. In the aftermath of the Night of Sorrows, Cortés regrouped, replenished his forces with reinforcements from Cuba, and forged even more alliances with discontented tribes. By the time he returned to Tenochtitlan in 1521, the city was weakened by disease and internal strife. The final siege lasted for months, a brutal grind that left Tenochtitlan in ruins. By August, the once great city fell, and with it, the Aztec Empire crumbled. So was it Cortés' military genius that won the day? Perhaps in part, but the real MVP was Smallpox, that silent, unrelenting force that reshaped the New World in the blink of an eye. The Spanish might have wielded steel and gunpowder, but it was disease that did the dirty work. In the end, the clash of civilizations wasn't just a story of swords and strategy. It was a sobering reminder of the fragility of power and the unpredictable whims of fate. As we wrap up this chapter in the saga of the Aztecs, remember that history isn't just about the victors or the vanquished. It's about the complex tapestry of human ambition, folly, and resilience. Stay tuned, because there's more to unravel as we continue to explore the echoes of this ancient empire. So there we have it, the curtain call for the Aztec Empire, a tale of grandeur, grit, and gut-wrenching downfall. Tenochtitlan's fall in 1521 was more than just the end of a city. It was the finale of a vibrant civilization that had danced on the stage of history with unmatched flair. But before the Aztecs' exit stage left, let's pause and consider their legacy. It's a story of jaw-dropping achievements and grim realities, tightly interwoven like the intricate patterns of their beloved textiles. First up, let's talk about the cultural buffet the Aztecs laid out for posterity. These folks were the ultimate multitaskers, juggling art, architecture, and astronomy like it was just another Tuesday. Their codices, those colorful pictorial manuscripts, are the comic books of Mesoamerican history, revealing everything from daily life to divine cosmologies. Think of them as the original graphic novels, minus the capes and tights. And let's not forget the Templo Mayor, the iconic temple that rose like a stone phoenix from the heart of Tenochtitlan. It was a testament to their architectural prowess, a skyscraper of spirituality standing at about 60 meters tall, a skyscraper that witnessed both devotion and sacrifice. And speaking of devotion, the Aztec calendar was a feat of mathematical genius. Picture this. A solar year divided into 18 months of 20 days each, with 5 unlucky days to make up the 365. It was a system that would make even the most seasoned timekeeper blink in admiration. The Aztecs didn't just count days. They orchestrated the cosmos with a precision that would make any modern-day planner envious. Their understanding of celestial movements was light years ahead of their time, an astronomical legacy that still sparks wonder today. But here's the kicker. Despite their towering achievements, the Aztecs are often remembered through a distorted lens. The dramatic tales of human sacrifice have overshadowed their story, casting them as ruthless bloodletters rather than the sophisticated society they truly were. Sure, they had a penchant for offering hearts to the gods, but let's be real. Europeans were busy with their own gruesome pastimes, like witch hunts and inquisitions. The Aztecs were no more brutal than their contemporaries. They just had a knack for ceremonial flair that made their rituals unforgettable. Yet, amid the myths and legends, let's face some cold, hard truths. The fall of Tenochtitlan wasn't just the result of Spanish steel or cunning strategy. Nope, It was the uninvited guest of smallpox that played the silent assassin. This microscopic marauder decimated the Aztec population, leaving behind a trail of devastation that no amount of military might could match. It's a grim reminder that history often hinges not on the grand gestures of men, but on the invisible whims of nature. And what about the economic engine that powered the Aztec Empire? Tribute was its lifeblood, a steady flow of goods that kept the wheels turning. But this system, while lucrative, was a double-edged sword. It bred resentment among the conquered peoples, like a subscription service with no cancellation option. When Cortés came knocking, these simmering tensions erupted, offering him allies in his campaign against the Aztecs. It's a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and it played out with devastating consequences for the empire. In the aftermath of Tenochtitlan's fall, the Spanish set about remaking the city and the empire in their own image. They raised temples, built churches, and imposed their language and religion with evangelical zeal. The Aztecs' vibrant world was subsumed under the weight of colonial ambition, a cultural erasure that reverberates through history. Yet, despite this upheaval, the spirit of the Aztecs endures, a resilient echo that refuses to be silenced. Their legacy is one of paradoxes, a dance of light and shadow that continues to captivate us. On one hand, they were architects of a mighty empire, masters of trade, agriculture, and diplomacy. On the other, they were warriors bound by a cosmic contract to feed the gods. It's a narrative that's both romantic and real, a tapestry of triumphs and tragedies that challenges our perceptions. In the end, the Aztecs were more than just a footnote in the annals of history. They were innovators and visionaries, a civilization that soared to dizzying heights before being swept away by the tides of change. Their story is not merely one of conquest and collapse. It's a reminder of the complexities of human ambition and the fragility of power. As we look back at their world, we're left with a mosaic of memories, a kaleidoscope of culture that defies simple explanations. So, as we close this chapter on the Aztec Empire, let's carry forward the lessons from their rise and fall. History isn't just about what happened, it's about understanding why it mattered. It's about recognizing the echoes of the past in our present, the way those ancient stories continue to shape our world. The Aztecs may have been conquered, but their legacy endures, a testament to the enduring power of human creativity and resilience. And with that, we bid farewell to Tenochtitlan, a city that once shimmered like a jewel in the lake and now lives on in the chronicles of history. It's a tale that reminds us of the enduring dance between ambition and adversity, a story as timeless as the stars that guided the Aztecs on their cosmic journey. Let's keep that spirit alive, ever curious, ever questioning, as we continue to explore the vast and vibrant tapestry of human history.